Okay, good morning. We are good to go. We are being recorded on Zoom and are live on YouTube.
Okay, start with me.
Yes.
Good morning and welcome to our final New York State Commission on Forensic Science meeting of 2025. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank those of you who were able to attend the information session yesterday. It is a busy time of the year to have back-to-back sessions. And also I would like to thank Dr. Bufalino for his service on the commission. He has been a commission member for the past 10 years, and this will be his last meeting. So thank you. Thank you, Pat. And, yes, I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank all of you for your service to the state on this commission. We really appreciate it. And I would also like to welcome our newest commission member, the Office of Forensic Services Director, Shelley Palmer.
Thank you.
Official. I will note at this time that we also have Rachel Singer, Chief of the Forensic Science Unit in the Kings County District Attorney's Office, joining us today. The Honorable William Fitzpatrick is unable to attend and has designated Ms. Singer to participate on his behalf. Ms. Singer will not count toward the quorum nor be a voting member, but we are happy to have you nonetheless. As I am attending remotely from my office in Westchester, I will have Ms. Palmer run today's meeting. Back to you, Shelley.
Thank you, Commissioner. At this time, I'll take attendance to establish a quorum. And I'd like to note that Dr. Willie is joining us remotely due to extraordinary circumstances. Please respond present when I call your name. Lieutenant Colonel Banbury?
Present.
Dr. Buffalino?
Present.
Dr. Chithlin?
Here.
Ms. DeCastro? Present. Mr. Epstein?
Present.
Bothwaite?
Present.
Dr. Marciano?
Present.
Ms. Murphy?
Present.
Ms. Roush?
Present.
Ms. Schmitz?
Present.
Dr. Willie?
Present.
Thank you. And including Commissioner Rosado and myself, we've established a quorum. Everyone has received the most updated agenda for today's meeting. Is there any discussion regarding today's agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve today's agenda? Motion by Dr. Buffalino and a second. Second, Ms. Schmitz. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, thank you. The motion carries. We've also received a draft of the minutes from the September 26th, 2025 meeting. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion. Murphy, a second?
Second.
Ms. DeCastro. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? I'll abstain. With that, the motion carries. This time, our next item on the executive session is on the agenda is the executive session. Do I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters relating to a current investigation or matters that may lead to the appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or suspension of a particular person? So moved. Castro. Second. Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Yes. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. With that, the motion carries. At this point, if you're not a commission member, staff, you'll be expelled from the virtual meeting and the streaming will be paused. The stream will resume in executive session.
Recording has stopped.
Okay, we are good to go. We are being recorded on Zoom and are live on YouTube. We can get started.
Thank you, Taylor, for getting us started. We're just going to give another minute here in Albany to let the public back in. We're waiting for them.
Shelley, can we do a break later on? Because usually we used to do a break right before the executive session when it was late, and now.
I think we could probably work a break. There's quite a few items in the middle of the agenda that
Okay.
probably we'll be able to finish one and then take a break. Yes, everyone should have an opportunity to stand and stretch, use the facilities if needed.
All provide sample.
Yeah. Looks like we have the public back here in Albany, so we'll resume the agenda now. We are back in open session and no action was taken during executive session. So we'll now move into the accreditation updates part of our agenda. First lab, the Nassau County Office of Chief Medical Examiners, Division of Forensic Services. In October, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity. There were no findings, and ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of the assessment activity. Are there any questions for the laboratory today? Okay. Seeing none. Next, we have the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology. ANAB conducted a desk audit to add rapid DNA to the scope of accreditation. The scope extension does not require a vote, as the extension is based on changes to the QAS documents and ANAB's scoping and it's not a new technology to the lab, so it's just changed where it's located on the scope of accreditation. In October, the laboratory underwent a surveillance assessment activity with witnessing, and there were no findings. And the laboratory is awaiting their final documents from ANAB. Are there any questions for the lab regarding the scope extension or the surveillance assessment? Okay, we have members of the lab available remotely. Taylor, if you could find them for us.
Good morning.
Good morning. Could you just let us know who's on your end? We see a few.
Hi, Craig O'Connor, Director of Forensic Biology, Meredith Rosenberg, Deputy Director, Kira McKay, Quality Assurance Manager, and Tiffany Vasquez, DNA Technical Leader.
Thank you. Jessica?
Thank you. Good morning. I just had a couple questions about the scope extension related to RAPID. Could you remind us what you use RAPID DNA for in the laboratory?
Can you hear me? Just to double check, we have issues with the microphone. Oh,
yes, you're a little low, but we can hear.
I will come closer. So currently the RAPID is only online for the Andy swab specifically, and its intended use is basically on hold for any mass disaster family assistance center use for family reference samples. Periodically, we may use it just to sort of keep our own freshness on it for a missing person's reference sample. And we obviously perform like proficiency tests, et cetera, on the instruments. But that's its limited scope use right now.
Just for missing persons.
Correct.
And only for known reference samples in a missing person's case. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And I saw in our materials you had conducted a performance check when you initially brought the instrument online. Did you ever conduct a full internal validation? If not, why not?
We did what we called sort of an enhanced performance check. It was actually back, I believe, in 2019, presented in front of the DNA subcommittee. It's hard to do we did contamination studies and most of the studies you would think of as far as a validation, but there's no requirement to do an extensive validation. If we were bringing it online for something where we were doing modified rapid and analyzing off of the rapid machine, then we would obviously do much more testing for that.
So if you change purpose, and maybe this is also a question for, I guess, ANAP, but if you're going to move beyond the mass disaster family reference sample use, you will conduct a full internal validation or is that right?
If we were doing modified rapid, so not using the rapid data as it came off the instrument, but putting it in our own analysis software, we would need to do a full internal validation for that. Yeah.
Okay. Are there plans to do that or?
Not at this time. We're still evaluating what our best use case is for the instruments, and so it's not in our agenda at this time.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the laboratory? Thank you. Next, we have the New York City Police Department latent print section. The laboratory has notified DCJS and ANAB that Lieutenant Brian De La Rosa has been appointed as the director of the latent print section. Lieutenant De La Rosa's CV has been provided for the review of the commission. If there are any questions for the laboratory, we can. There we go. Wrong lab, not the crime lab. Thank you. Are there any questions for the latent print? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you. Next is the New York City Police Department Police Laboratory. In October, the laboratory underwent a full ANAB reassessment. There were no findings, and during the reassessment, several changes to the laboratory scope were made. In the document examination discipline, the item stamp was removed from the chemical physical comparison and the qualitative determination row. In the impressions discipline, physical item was removed from the enhancement, physical comparison, and qualitative determination rows. And in the seized drug discipline, ultraviolet spectroscopy was added as a key equipment technology to the quantitative measurements row. ANAB has granted accreditation based on the results of this activity. Are there any questions for the laboratory?
Is this one we vote on?
Yes, we will be voting on this one. Yes. Yep. So we do have members available. Neil, thank you for joining us. You have a few other members available. Will they be jumping into?
Yes, please. Jeff and Stephanie, can you please join?
Jeff, you are unmuted. If you could please just turn your camera on as well.
It's giving me a warning that says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
We can continue just now. Jeff can hear us, so if you know, I don't want to delay the meeting too much.
Great, thank you. Erin, you question?
Yeah, so I guess specifically as to this relates to the impressions, I just want to make sure I understand your practice more generally though. In the pattern matching disciplines, when you find matching characteristics, how do you report the significance of that match? Like, it's essentially a question about source attribution. Do you say this is the source, like this print was left by this shoe? Or do you give it more as a likelihood ratio, kind of qualitative, this is more consistent with than the counterfactual?
Is that the source attribution?
Sorry?
The source attribution, as you first stated, your first statement, that is our current reporting.
You do source attribution, so you don't follow the standards that say don't do that. You follow the practice of saying this is the shoe.
Correct, at this time, yes.
Okay. Here's another question. Thank you. Are there any other questions for the laboratory? Seeing none, you're correct, we will be voting. So at this point, is there a motion to issue full renewal of New York State Laboratory accreditation to the New York City Police Department Laboratory concurrent with its ANAB accreditation? So move. Castro, a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? See one. Anyone abstaining? Okay, thank you. With that, the motion carries. Congratulations, NYPD, on
Thank
your
you.
reunification. All right. Next up, we have the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services Latent Print Laboratory. In November, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity and there were no findings. ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of this activity. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Seeing none, we will move to the next. Onondaga County Center for Forensic Sciences Laboratory. In September, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity. There were no findings, and ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on these results. Any questions for the laboratory today? Okay. Seeing none. Suffolk County Crime Laboratory. And this is another agenda item where we'll be voting to renew accreditation. In August, the laboratory underwent full ANAB reassessment. There were no findings, and during the assessment, several changes to this laboratory's scope were made. Trajectory determination was moved from the firearms and tool mark discipline to the scene investigation discipline, and reconstruction was removed from the scene investigation discipline. ANAB has renewed the laboratory's accreditation based on the results of this activity. The DNA subcommittee has reviewed the documentation and issued a binding recommendation to approve the renewal of New York State accreditation in the discipline of biology. Are there any questions for the lab regarding this reassessment? Yes, I'm seeing some. We have members virtually available. Give them a second to turn their cameras off.
Good morning, can you see us?
Can you identify who's there today?
Hi, I'm Inga Dorfman, the quality manager, and this is Chief Constance Dingle. Good morning.
Good morning, thank you. We have a couple questions here in Albany. Okay, Jessica.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
I did want to ask you about a subject that's come up at several meetings with respect to a mixture interpretation where there was an incorrect number of contributor, or there was a debate about the number of contributor, and it turned out there was an issue of relatedness with respect to the DNA mixture. And I think the lab should be commended for doing an extensive investigation, which you reported on at least two, maybe even more meetings. I did want to ask if, and I think we talked about this a little at the last meeting, is the lab going, as a result of this incident, going to do additional validation work specifically with respect to the presence of related individuals in DNA mixtures? Are you going to add or supplement to your existing validation?
Yeah, we also have Carrie Anito joining us. She's the biological sciences technical leader, so she's going to answer your question.
Hi, so we just wrapped up our next StarMix version validation, where we did do family mixtures within that validation. It's still going through the final stages of review. but at this point, we did add a section for family mixtures.
And then the plan in the next few weeks is to start training the staff on the new validation and then moving forward into 2026.
That's good to hear. And will there be additions, I imagine, to your protocols with respect to the interpretation of relatives or mixtures where there's suspected relatedness issues?
It's going to be taken into account when we're determining the number of contributor, which it already is essentially, but basically what we were looking to do with the star mix validation was to kind of see how different family mixtures present, and that just kind of gave us more of a background to be able to determine number of contributor, not so much differences within the star mix running or interpretation.
Sorry, could you explain that a little? What do you mean not so much with?
So basically when we ran all these family mixtures, we were looking to see if you could tell initially from all the different mixtures the number of contributors that are in there. And then we ran them with some of the known contributors that are in there, ran them and then performed LRs with some unknowns that we know weren't part of the mixtures. So basically this study gave us more of a background, a solid kind of sitting on how we can see number of contributors within family mixtures that we've created ourselves in-house. And then in our new star mix version that we're using, we have something called MX priors. So if we're aware, we look at the mixture and we're thinking that this is a family related situation, we can adjust the contributor percentages to line up with our assessment of the number of contributors and then run the star mix with that. So that will be an option once we come online.
So you validated this mixture prior aspect of star mix?
Yes.
Did you use actual related individuals in your testing or simulated relatives or both?
We used actual related individuals.
Did you also do simulations or? Did you observe false positives for non-contributing relatives of people who actually were in the mixture, if that makes sense?
Yes, we did. I don't have the validation report in front of me right now to give you exact information.
Sure.
We can see that in general, yes.
Okay. And do you make your, at least an executive summary of your validation available publicly on a website or?
No, not at this time.
I think we'll be discussing that later on in the meeting or in future meetings, but all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, same set of questions if you were listening before about the pattern matching disciplines, whether when you report source attributions or you report more in the form of a likelihood ratio of strength of evidence.
We report source attribution at this time.
As I'm sure you can infer, I think that's scientifically unsupported, but otherwise I recognize it's a practice.
Are there other questions for the laboratory? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept the binding recommendation from the DNA subcommittee and to issue full renewal of New York State accreditation to the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory concurrent with ANAB accreditation? Lydia, a second? Pat, second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? All right, thank you. Congratulations, Suffolk, on your renewal accreditation. Up next, we have the Westchester County Department of Labs and Research Division of Forensic Toxicology. The laboratory has notified DCJS that Eliza Scuderi has resumed the role of full-time quality assurance manager. Are there any questions for the laboratory regarding the update? Seeing none. Next is the Westchester County Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory. In June, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity. There was one finding, which the laboratory remediated. ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of the assessment activity. Are there any questions for the lab? Just for note, we did review those documents. Okay. Seeing none. That is the end of our accreditation section of the lab. Next is old business, and the first item is familial search update. I just need to pull up the numbers to share. Okay. Since our meeting in September, there have been 3 applications received. 2 are initial applications and 1 was a renewal. There have been 3 applications approved. 1 application has been withdrawn, and 4 searches have been completed. That brings our totals to 83 applications in total, 64 initial, 11 renewals, and 8 resubmissions. 63 have been approved, 4 have been withdrawn, 13 have been rejected, and 3 are in the review stage. Of the 63 approved, we have 10 in the search queue, 53 searches have been completed, 40 no releasable results, and 13 with results. There are 5 investigations ongoing and 8 closed investigations. Those are the updates from familial search.
Do we know anything about the closed investigations? Like, did they result in a charge or an identification of someone?
We do have some information about those. 5 of the closed were after additional analysis was performed, and then they were closed. There were 3 successful investigations. 2 have been adjudicated, and 1 of those was completely cleared. So. Next in old business, we have the updates from the subcommittee. So bear with me, I'm going to provide some background here before we dive into this. In response to the discussions at our last meeting surrounding the statements provided by the DNA subcommittee on the NIST human factors and NIST DNA mixture interpretation report, 3 commission members submitted additional questions for the subgroups. These questions were compiled and reviewed for scope, relevance, and overlap by OFS and the Office of Legal Services. Before we get into the questions, just remind the commission of the specific requests to the DNA subcommittee and provide additional background. In September of 2001, in response to a draft copy of the NIST DNA mixture interpretation foundation's review being released, a motion was made for laboratories performing probabilistic genotyping to provide their validations and standard operating procedures to the DNA subcommittee to assist in their evaluation of the foundation's review. The DNA mixture interpretation foundation's review was published in December of 2024 as a final document. In response, the DNA subcommittee requested updated documents from the laboratories and formed a subgroup to review the validations, standard operating procedures, and the final report from NIST to provide key takeaways for the labs. At the May 2024 meeting, the DNA subcommittee recognized the NIST Forensic DNA Interpretation and Human Factors Report. At their August and November 2024 meetings, the subcommittee discussed the report with representatives from the Biological Technical Working Group. During the December 2024 meeting of the Commission on Forensic Science, a motion was made to request the DNA subcommittee provide a position statement on that report. In response, the subcommittee voted to form a subgroup to review and rate the recommendations and provide a written statement to the Commission. From February of 2025, when both subgroups were formed, to when the documents were provided to the Commission, OFS facilitated a total of 17 meetings over a 5-month period. At this point, I'd like to welcome DNA Subcommittee Chair, Dr. Coble, and DNA Subcommittee Member, Dr. Corrado. I'll ask a few of the questions that we have and allow Drs. Corrado and Coble to provide their responses. Following the questions, if time allows, we'll open up the floor to Commission members for any follow-up questions. So if you would are comfortable coming up, we'd invite you. And if you need a few minutes to bring things with you, see laptops. You need power or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I have papers.
I'm old school.
And a typewriter. Record.
We have, can they hear us from here?
Yes. So behind you and above you, there's a little puck that's green. That's the microphone.
Would you mind sitting next to Dr. Kirby?
Thank you for joining us today. So I know I just mentioned what OFS had facilitated, the 17 meetings over 5 months, but could you provide just a brief overview of the process that the subgroups went through in that time?
So we had, we divvied up the two publications amongst members of the subcommittee and noted that one member of the subcommittee, Dr. Corrado, Dr. Gettings, is an employee of NIST. I don't think she personally was part of either of these reports, but she felt she should recuse herself from being part of that. So we had two members of the subcommittee, in addition to myself, for both reports. So again, yeah, we've met over a period of several weeks, trying to find time to sort of go through both reports. Both reports, especially the human factors report, is I think over 400 pages, and it was a lot of material. And I will caveat that with a lot of good material. There's a lot of very positive things from that report. The mixture report was well over 200 pages. So it was a lot of material, and we sort of went through and looked at some of the major recommendations or conclusions from those reports. And that's sort of what we focused on as far as what our meetings were. Anything else you want to add?
I think I agree. That's how, I was on the human factors subcommittee, and it was Dr. Sozer and myself. We had a third member, but that member didn't end up working with us. So, and just as Dr. Cole said, we spent a lot of time reading. We both had read through the entire document, and then we spent a lot of time reading through the recommendations, going back when we need to get additional information, and coming up with, how we interpreted and how we could best advise them.
So I just want to point out that although it was 17 meetings that were facilitated together over the 5-month period, there was additional time spent on your own personal time to review these documents in addition to the group meetings.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. In the human factors report, the DNA subcommittee did not agree with wording as written. The evaluation, and I quote, the evaluation of DNA comparison cannot conclusively identify an individual as the source of the DNA. In several recommendations, 5.3 and 6.2, could you please explain why you disagreed? And if you need reference, we have some of the reference material around, but
I think I can give a general idea. I think, our concern is that if we're going to be providing statements to readers of the report or jury members, any stakeholders, we want to make sure that the statements that we're providing are clearly understood and help the trier of fact understand what we mean and not cause confusion. And I think our concern with that statement was that it could be a little bit confusing where it says the comparison cannot conclusively identify an individual as the source. The lab is providing an association, is providing a significance with that association, and it's really up to the jury to determine with that information as well as the other evidence and context of the case, if they feel that, they determine that they believe that it's identified as source, right? So, and I think by saying you cannot conclusively identify an individual might basically cause them to ignore the strength of the evidence I think our concern was there's really no empirical evidence that that statement will help them understand. It might confuse. There was a study, I think it was back done in 2023 by Florida International University, where they had looked at providing, it was for late prints, but it's sort of related. They had provided a video for jurors to watch to help them. And the video was about proper testimony, limitations of testimony. And, they had a group that watched the video and then a control group that did not. And, they looked at, did that video help them understand the limitations of the testimony? And it did, which is great. But they also looked at, did that information cause them to not make a proper decision, regarding the end result of the trial? And it did not have any negative effects. So I think that kind of a study would show, yeah, this statement is helpful. We were a bit concerned that this particular statement was confusing. I can tell you, I brought it up to my family members, to some colleagues that are not DNA analysts, and when they heard that statement, they pretty much were like, so you're saying that DNA cannot help determine the source? And that's not what that statement means, but I think that's how it's interpreted. So I think we felt that the way it was worded was a little problematic.
I think also just to point out that the human factors, we'll call it the human factors report, did not undergo a public peer review, if you will. It was published without output or comments from the public, which may have helped. I think with the mixture report, there was a long period of time where that document was open for public comments, and I think that NIST did a great job listening and making some edits to that. So little things like that may have been corrected, say, if there wasn't the opportunity to have that kind of public comment.
Can you please elaborate on the response you provided to recommendation 6.1 of the Human Factors Report? Specifically, there are some instances where it may not be necessary to meet.
Oh, yeah. I think that maybe that our comment was misunderstood, or we didn't state it clearly. We 100% agree that labs should make themselves available to meet with attorneys on either side. What we were meaning by that is that the way we interpreted how it was wording was saying that labs should always meet with attorneys, and we were stating that it's not up to the lab. I think labs would like to meet with the attorneys, but it's not often possible to get the attorneys to come meet with you. So it's not really the lab's responsibility the labs are responsible. They should be available to meet, but they can't force someone to meet. And in particular, I know there are sometimes attorneys on either side that if the DNA, there was no DNA profile generated or there was an exclusion, the attorneys might say, we don't need to meet. Maybe they should, but I think the attorneys think they shouldn't. And so I don't think, it's on the lab to say you have to meet. That's what we meant. Not that the lab would ever decide we don't need to meet with you. It's not the lab's prerogative. They should be. That's how we meant that.
And then in recommendations 7.1 and 7.2 in the Human Factors Report relates to the key takeaway statement in 5.4 from the Mixture Interpretation Report. Can the DNA subcommittee expand on their response to the topic?
Yeah. I think we certainly believe that it's up to the DNA analyst testifying to make it very clear that the type of DNA testing they're doing cannot determine how or when DNA was deposited. But I think what our concern was in saying that the lab analyst should never answer any questions could be detrimental. For example, if you have a cervical swab that has a single source DNA, male DNA profile, you saw too numerous to count sperm in that swab, I think it would be okay for a DNA analyst. It probably is more likely that that DNA profile came from deposition of semen than it came from some kind of secondary or tertiary transfer, someone touching an underwear and then it got there. So I think there's situations like that where it could clarify. I think certainly there's other situations where, say on a firearm, you have a mixture of 4 people. That clearly, I think the analyst would have to say, no, we can't give any inclination as to how that DNA got there. And I think if they didn't say that, I think it could be detrimental to the defense, honestly, if, you just say, I can't answer any questions. We also think that, there's a little bit of a danger in that if we don't answer those questions, the jury could misinterpret the subsource LR to be an activity level LR. We have to be very careful to make sure that we make that clear. And so, we just didn't agree that analysts shouldn't answer it. What we would say is that you need to answer those questions generally about TPPR, and you need to make sure you're making it very clear that your DNA, the type of analysis you're doing does not give you information about how or when the DNA was deposited.
Are there any follow-up questions from the commission members regarding these questions and the responses? Erin.
I mean, I have a general, so first I just want to say thank you because I know this is a huge lift. These are big reports and I really appreciated point by point going through each of the, like we could have gotten back a 3-page letter that's like, yeah, we agree with some things and not others. And so we got a very comprehensive. And I just want to say, I also think that's really important because even, an administrator in a lab, not even, especially doesn't have time necessarily to read 600 pages, of this material. And even if they do, doesn't have the benefit of maybe other people looking at it with the same fresh eyes, to talk right then about, do we agree, do we disagree? And so I think the service of just the committee together using your expertise to point by point go through and react is invaluable. And hopefully this document is something that's more easy for either someone to read in a lab alongside the report and kind of take away what they want to take away, or just read that because it's shorter and easier to get to. So thank you. I guess I wanted to understand better in general how the subcommittee sees itself, as a conduit between the labs that we regulate and this kind of material, and like what the subcommittee is kind of doing, especially for the recommendations where we agree, to make sure that's what's happening in labs. So it's a very kind of big picture question, but essentially, how can we help bridge between, what I like to think of as kind of the state of the art, or hopefully a version of the state of the art of what we're, hoping our labs do. And as we know, like the day-to-day, very hard to take that 30,000 view. To change practices that may be there for a long time but aren't state of the art anymore, or to just share information that maybe someone is unaware of.
I mean, my personal feeling on this is that I personally view this DNA subcommittee to be a resource. I first met Kathy in the inaugural OSAC committee that we were on for biology. And I think the model of OSAC, where you're using a bottom-up approach, where you're getting people together to talk and determine what should we make this to be, what standards should we have when it comes to any topic. I think that's a much better way to go, and having a resource like the New York, technical leaders to be able to talk, we'd be there as a resource rather than it being a top down, do this, do that, because we're not the ones that are in the lab, and we don't, but I do feel like we can be a resource if asked, and certainly I think that's the sort of approach that I think we should take.
And you all met with the technical leaders about these two specific reports?
No, our mission was to from the commission was to evaluate these reports with our own. We did not meet independently with any of the technical leaders from New York.
I mean, is that something you'd be willing to do if we could encourage a gathering where
the BioTwig did come and attend the subcommittee meetings. So the chair of the BioTwig was available to discuss at the open meeting. So that did take place.
I guess I'm just thinking of something that is a little bit more collaborative. I mean, I agree that top down isn't always good, but I guess I disagree that bottom up is always better. I prefer a model where both are kind of in dialogue, and us as a commission and you as a DNA subcommittee may be making the time for that and incentivizing the review of some of this material. Seems like it could be a valuable exercise. I mean, understanding limitations of all different, whether that's in person, whether what that looks like, I think could be variable, but it is a large volume of material from the best minds in the field. And it's now been examined by a collective that can then reflect and react on it. And I just feel it would be incredibly beneficial to do another version of that, recognizing the ideal of it, you know, is probably not going to happen, but some version of this could happen. It would be a real shame to me, for instance, if all the leaders of the DNA, you know, whoever the right person is in a lab, didn't read your response, didn't read the response, at least, if not the full report. And I think as a commission, we should be making that happen.
We did provide to the labs and the technical leads at the BioTwig these reports.
Mhm.
So we have dispersed, I can't make them read it. I hope they read it, but we
Right.
provide them things. And they do meet quarterly. I would not want to speak for the BioTwig, but they could extend an invitation certainly to the subcommittee to attend it. And I don't even know if they have a meeting scheduled in 2026 yet, to be quite honest. But they are pretty collaborative, and I think NICLAC would encourage collaboration.
Absolutely, but I do know, yeah, the reports were distributed. In fact, I received it through my trade representative, so that's,
The original reports and the response, and yeah. Yes. Just being, I mean, I just don't always do my homework, and I feel like you're more likely to. If you're
yes, that's how I received the response.
There's a big pile of things you're supposed to be reading.
No, that's, so the communication has been great between the subcommittee and the technical working group. You know, I don't know if all the directors received it, but yes, it went to the TWIG members.
And we did send in the report to the directors as well. But by report, I mean the subcommittee's reports.
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, certainly, if members of the BioTwig would, you know, have questions or have, you know, they'd like us to provide input on something, we're happy to do that. I mean, I agree with Mike, I do see that as our role, you know, for them to be as a resource. If they would like us to talk to them about something or, you know, suggest something, they're always welcome to ask.
We also do call for agenda items. So the meetings are coming if you're interested, so labs are aware. Yep.
I have one more question, but I don't want to take up there. So the other question I had was just generally about what I see as a kind of pervasive issue, and I'm wondering about the committee's response and how it relates to reports. So in general, I'm a very big fan of transparency when it comes to things that don't implicate individual humans, you know. And so in general, I see absolutely no reason why lab protocols should not be online, you know, and easily available to whoever wants to look at them, whether it's a hobbyist or someone at a lab in another state or a defense lawyer or whomever. And I feel the same way about validation studies. If you have to redact certain information, fine, but you know, and that seemed to be shared in the reports. I didn't get a sense from your response that you shared that view. So if not, why not? Like with those two categories of materials, just SOPs and validations, why, am I right that I'm not sensing from you agreement about making the public view transparent? And if so, what are the concerns? Why not?
I am also a big fan of transparency. We validated for casework the intelligence kit for FGG. ASCLD has a portal where you can upload your SOPs, your validation studies, and they are public facing. So that's what we did with, we decided at that point, I think we were about the fourth lab to do an internal validation of intelligence, and it was not publishable. No journal would accept it. But we put it out there with ASCLD so that anyone could go and look to see what we did and, you know, to offer that. So I think there are mechanisms like that. I know that in the past, previously when I worked at NIST, John Butler was very eager to try to get people to also put their mixture validation studies, any kind of validation study, open on Starbase. And again, it's been a little while. I haven't, you know, talked to John about that, but I know that there's also that potential opportunity. I think NIST would host. I think that the issue is, we, you know, at my organization, we have difficulties when we want to use the university's website to be able to post stuff. We do have a website for our center, but we probably could post our stuff there. But then it becomes an issue of keeping up with it when someday, we've changed our name. We're no longer the Health Science Center. We're now UNT, University of North Texas Health Fort Worth. That's our official name. So all of those links that you're wanting to have to now update, and they all kind of go away in the future. That's why we decided, let's use ASCLD. ASCLD has that kind of support to maintain this for the future. So I think there are opportunities there for labs to be able to put this online.
Is ASCLD behind a paywall or is it just fully?
No, this is the ASCLD FRC, Forensic Research Committee. I'm actually on that committee. So, and they have a portal where labs can upload their validations. It's quite helpful for labs. I mean, the idea behind it was to collaborate so that labs that are looking to validate a new thing could review how other labs did it. And, we're always trying to grow that. We actually have a campaign right now to, increase that. And I would reiterate what Mike said. I mean, personally, I do think transparency is the best way to go. I will say that, it's part of the New York discovery laws that the procedures have to be turned over. And, I think if you have a defense expert, certainly if they ask for validation, I think that they should have your validation summary. So, I think it is best practice, but I agree also that I know when I was in charge of a lab, it's not always easy for the labs to, their IT departments don't support it. And it is a challenge, even for us with the discovery law, one of our quality assurance managers' responsibilities was to make sure that we're updated. We had like 700 policies because ours were all separate and each discipline had them. That includes documents too. But like every time we made a change, you had to make sure you updated it. So it is challenging to keep it up. So I think it kind of depends on what the lab can handle. But certainly I think the more transparent we can be, the better.
I just want to add on that portal, the New York City OCME has validations that they've posted. So it is being used in the state as well.
Yeah. Yeah, OCME I think is required to do so by law, local law, but they have done it very successfully. They archive all their old versions, and I can say as a defender, and I think Rachel would agree, it's remarkably helpful for lawyers on both sides, right? To be able to go to the website and see what are their case acceptance criteria, what are the steps of testing, what have they validated? OCME even puts their validation summaries. I know they're well funded, and I know it's in response to local legislation that they are doing so, but it has real tangible, I think, benefits in the criminal justice system. So, how many labs have uploaded to ASCLD FRC? Do you know?
You're talking nationally?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that it's not, I don't think labs, this is anecdotally from what I'm recalling, but I don't think specific labs are like uploading all of them. I think it's sort of like, oh, we have this new validation, or here's a validation. So I don't know the number.
Sure.
Yeah. But there's validations for all different disciplines.
Yeah. Okay, great. I want to echo what Aaron already said in thanking you for an enormous task. Also, I just want to acknowledge, I was very vocal, I think, for several meetings and encouraging the subcommittee to follow up with these, really critical blue ribbon panel reports that are so important. It's such a great opportunity to improve practice in New York. But I understand the ask was a little confusing or unclear, right? Like we're going to be talking about gap analysis, I imagine, with the OSAC standards. There's a big gap between saying, hey, review these studies and apply them to labs in New York, and then figuring out how to do that, especially, in your volunteer time. So I want to acknowledge that and thank you for all the work that you put in. But I do think it's an opportunity to figure out some areas, right, of improvement that labs could be taken, and also for us as a commission to ensure that we're exercising the oversight we need to. So I did want to ask a couple of questions in addition to the one that Shelley Shelley, I see you did get a copy of our written questions, right? Okay, fantastic. So just one right off the bat, I think it's important the commission knows this. Is any lab, DNA lab in the state of New York doing the combined probability of inclusion inappropriately or on complex mixtures? And I know Dr. Koval, you authored, I think, right, you were one of the authors of a paper on how to do it the right way. I think you were with all the B's, you were the C on that paper.
It also, if I may, sorry.
Yeah, please.
It also reminds me of 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, probably a few months ago, both John Butler and myself came before the commission to talk about the problems with mixtures. It's been around for quite a while.
Yes. So can you tell us in your, well, I guess I'll backtrack and ask exactly what you reviewed with respect to labs, actual work in a second, but can you tell this commission that no lab in the state of New York is inappropriately using CPI on DNA mixtures? Or is it just not something you can say? No?
I don't know that you provided that information.
Okay. Well, wouldn't it be in the validations in the protocol? So let me go to that. The validations were provided for every DNA testing lab to the subcommittee?
Validations of star mix.
Just of star mix, not of general mixture. Okay. Okay. And you got the protocols for the probabilistic genotyping?
Right.
Okay. Would you be able to tell them, probably not, if what kind of samples then were interpreted with PG, probabilistic genotyping, as opposed to another mixture interpretation method? Like, did you get the protocol saying, hey, here's a DNA mixture. If we can clearly deconvolute a major, we're going to use RMP. I'm just throwing over, right? If we can't, we'll use PG. Or if there's a non-deconvolutable component, we'll use PG on that. Do you know what I mean? Like that part of the protocols?
Yeah, I think what you're asking for is more of interpretation of protocols. These were mainly just validation of the actual software.
Okay.
So that, again, that is used to help drive the writing of those interpretation documents. But we only focused on.
Okay. And that might be the unclarity of the ask.
Yes, and I go back to 10 years ago. The biotrig was asked that question in around that conversation. So I think we have 10-year-old data, but we haven't asked that question of the biotrig to provide that information in any sort of recent time.
Okay, maybe we can just confirm with biotrig. Hopefully it's an easy, no, we're not. No one's doing it, but yeah, we should. That's something we should just know.
Again, 10 years ago, I believe they issued a statement committing to moving into the PG realm and away from. So
yeah, I think I have seen though in the course of being on this commission that CPI has still been used, but maybe not inappropriately. But that's sort of the motivation to ask this question. It's just something we should be sure about.
And if that's a different ask.
Sure, absolutely.
Maybe I could just interject for a minute because I think it relates to my series of questions too, which is like there's a version of what could happen next as a result of these reports, which is like these are the things we expect you are all. Here's a list of the things that we think you are all doing and you are all following because they are things we agree on, the human factors or the mixture report. Like we kind of all agree is what needs to be done in labs, and then labs can get that information of like these are the, and so if one of those things is we're not using CPE, CPIs, you know, they have just a very straight, and then if anyone's like, oh, that's what we do, it at least begins a dialogue of, you know, but like a list of the non-negotiable, distilling this very complex set of materials down to the non-negotiables, you know, and hopefully every lab says like, we're doing all of these things. So this is not an issue for us. And then it's more the gray areas, you know, things that maybe I would like done, somebody else doesn't think should be done, but just making sure we're all at minimum standards.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think you want to clarify, I think you're meaning for mixtures, right? Because it might be that they're using it on parentage testing, which might be appropriate.
Good point. Yep. I did have a couple other questions with respect to some of your findings in the letters. With respect to the use of likelihood ratios. So I guess this was for the working group on the NIST Mixture Foundation. The subcommittee working group stated that reports, or more importantly, reports from these labs clearly state the propositions used to inform the likelihood ratio assignments, et cetera, et cetera. maybe you didn't review these protocols if you were focused on the actual validation of StarMix, but can you say whether every laboratory in New York has a protocol or a policy for allowing defense alternate propositions proposed by the defense in a formulation of a likelihood ratio? Will a lab consider them?
I believe that's probably a lab question, but better for the labs than the subcommittee. I think that was outside of the scope of what they were doing at that moment.
So maybe we could, fair. So exactly what did you do with, I'm still a little unclear, what exactly did you, just so I can stop asking questions that you can't answer, what did you do with what the materials the lab gave you? What did they give you exactly, and what did you do with them?
Well, once again, we received the validation studies of StarMix, which is a probabilistic genotype.
The full ones? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I think it was, it had the executive summary and the actual validations, but it was a huge document. So, because it was compiled with all of the studies. Certainly, you know, I was looking at something online to ask the question of how long would it take to count to 1 million, the likelihood ratio of 1 million? And it would take, if you, 1 second for each number would take about 11 days. And documents like this from all the different labs, it would take days, weeks to go through. So I personally did a cursory look to see, was there, you know, did they do sensitivity testing? Did they do specificity testing? Did they, you know, and just sort of looking to see if they're sort of following the guidelines such as SWGDAM or OSAC, they're doing those kind of studies. And that was mainly what I was looking at. I didn't get down into the deep, you know, numbers, but just sort of looking like, yeah, when there's a mixture that is amplified with 50 picograms of DNA, guess what? They got likelihood ratios 1 or less than 1 is what you expect. Those kind of things, but nothing really that deep dive. Sure.
Just to provide some context for the review, the subcommittee working groups were trying to do a rather expeditious yet full review and be able to provide the commission with their reports in a way that didn't take. We want to do it well under a year and certainly more in a matter of months. So I think that's important to consider as well.
Yeah. And I would point out too that, you know, all of the labs validations are also reviewed during our ANAB audits by experts. Due to the fact that it was a 4-year window, some labs resubmitted because they had updated in that time frame. So they were being as transparent as possible within that original ask that we had sent to them, and reminded them of throughout the course of those years as you're doing these things, these updates. So you received multiple for some of them.
One thing that might have been, and I understand the sheer volume of material and your focus, I did have a question. Did you specifically look for testing? I asked Suffolk about it earlier with respect to relatedness issues with mixtures. Or was it incidental if you happen to see it? You saw it?
Yeah, I don't recall specifically looking at whether relatives were tested or not. I don't recall it.
Sure.
More of your questions?
Just
and then I was going to see if Mike's any of his.
Oh, Mike, you want to go ahead? I just have one more. I can finish. Go.
I'm good.
Oh, okay. And maybe again, this is outside the scope. So, but it was in your letter. I just didn't understand it, and I thought actually your explanations about a couple other points that I hadn't understood was really helpful today. So I'm hoping we can shed some light on this one. This was with respect to the mixed foundation review, the key takeaway 5.4. It's rather than offering definitive conclusions on TPPR, right? Transfer, persistence, prevalence, and recovery. Analysts should transparently describe how this uncertainty is incorporated into their propositions. What does that mean?
So with, I think as Dr. Corrado just mentioned earlier, when we start talking about the issues of transfer and persistence, recovery, so forth, TPPR, we move in the hierarchy of propositions and the likelihood ratio from an analysis and result at the subsource level to now up to the activity level. And I think that as far as when that kind of analysis is asked for, that we have to be transparent that we have not conducted a formal type of analysis. That requires a great deal of training and understanding. There is a 13-month-long course offered by the University of Lausanne that spends that entire time focusing on these kind of analyses, doing interpretations of activity, sort of activity level propositions. So I think that what we meant, or at least talking about trying to come up with doing it on the spot, to talk about the probability of transfer, the probability of recovery, and so forth. That is something that I think all analysts should be weary about doing, because you're now, like I said, you're essentially, all you've done is an analysis at the subsource level, and now you're trying to do an analysis maybe with or without a lot of training at the activity level. And I think that's something that we're wanting to be a little cautious of.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Maybe for the both of you, do you know of any laboratory that's applying like prior odds? Like if there's a rate, it's 90%. If it's on the dance floor and it's DNA transferred to the band of underwear, I'm sure you guys read the paper that I'm reciting. That's not as probable, so we'll give it 5%, and then 5% of just garment was in my washing machine and just so transferred my underwear to the victims. Right? I'm not giving good examples, but do you know of any laboratories that in the Bayesian world that are saying, here's the prior odds and going with that for activity level?
Not to my knowledge, not in the US. Again, at least I can only speak from my experience in Texas. So we have formed a group, sort of a group of technical leaders and trainers that are working on how we can address these questions that get asked. But the feeling, I think, for most labs in Texas is that if you're going to do that kind of formal analysis, it needs to be under your accreditation umbrella. It needs to be reviewed by a technical leader. It needs to, all of the training and education that you need. And really, we're not at that point. And I don't know if we will get to that point anytime soon to do these kind of analyses. But I don't know of any lab that's using sort of a prior probability. To me, that sounds full Bayesian of incorporating a prior and multiplying that times your likelihood ratio and then coming up with a posterior. And I don't know of any lab doing that.
It's interesting because the topic does interest me because of blood spatter analysis. Because obviously it's a little bit easier to talk about deposition when you're talking about patterns and rather than it is a fluid. So.
I would say, I listened to one of the webinars on a lot of this, and one of the European labs that's using their model for this, they commented that they were only able to analyze 6 cases per year. That's how complex it is and how long it took them. And I thought, well, that's not something that's going to be easily translatable here, And then there's the Ted Hunt article too, where there's questions about even if we wanted to do this, would it be accepted in U.S. courts? There's a really nice review article that came out in Science and Justice in September talking about the global barriers to adoption of this, and it has a lot of really, I think, useful information. You know, you might
I don't
wanna
know
check
that
that
one.
out.
Could you?
I can send it to you. Sure.
Otherwise, I just go on Instagram.
Yeah, David Kay on the legal questions. I think David Kay has a piece as well, because both in parentage, like I think there are real legal problems with doing it in the lab. The most you might be able to do is have like a chart with like 1% to 90% prior probabilities, and then show a jury like, you know, and that's like your best. And I think even that's questionable, like certainly lawyers would challenge it, but that's like your best bet. Yeah, basically, and then you could tell a jury, like if you think the prior probability is 1%, this is the number that speaks to you. And if you think it's 90%, you know.
Swig, the Swig document, I think, has.
Yeah.
Does Swig still carry for predicate in it, or? I should know. Okay, I'll listen.
Yeah, but even that, I think many courts would reject as invading the province of the jury.
I think there might be a new Swig Dam document coming out related to that as well. I heard that.
Is it out for, I should know.
I don't know. I heard that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, are there any other questions?
I have a general question.
Okay.
Is this the time for that?
Maybe I was going to say if we're good with this conversation, we'd wrap it up, bathroom break, and then resume, but.
Yeah. Well, I think it is, I think it's germane in this conversation, which is like, just in the DNAs, I just want to understand what's happening next, I guess, is the question. Because in the committee's response, there was a lot of, you know, we think the BioTwig should discuss this. And so I would assume that is something that the DNA subcommittee would take the lead on, but if they're not taking the lead on it, I think we should invite the BioTwig leadership, or I just don't want these very concrete recommendations of like, this is stuff the BioTwig should do to kind of fall to the side because nobody followed up. So if that is something the commission should do, if it's something we should ask the DNA subcommittee to do, if it's something that, I just want to make sure that that's happening.
Is that something NICLAC could ask the BioTwig to look at, re-review and have a conversation, put it on their agenda?
I think we'd ask them to put it on their agenda.
Yeah, and see where it goes. I mean, are you looking for a report back from the BioTwig after they have a conversation?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to get a sense of feedback. Maybe the right way to do this then would be for for that conversation to take place and whatever that looks like. I mean, I understand also this is not like a 3-month request. This is like maybe a year from now, we get an update on what happened, or in 6 months, we get an update on like, you know, the BioTwig met and they agreed with all these things that the recommendation from the subcommittee was to adopt, and these are the changes that are going to be made. Again, I understand scoping wise, this is not a like 5-second project, but I just don't want it to die. I would like it to, you know, all this hard work that was done by the subcommittee to go through every single recommendation and say BioTwig should do this, or, you know, we should consider that, or I think we should make sure that there's an incentive in a very reasonable way to follow through. So maybe what that looks like is the follow up from the meeting, or, you know.
I agree with that. Or else what's it all for?
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Because there were suggestions made. And so understanding how the technical, excuse me, how the technical folks, Twig would respond. This is a good suggestion. This is not possible because.
So I think it's fair to ask them to put it on their agenda and review it, but I guess I'm a little unclear what the end goal is here, because again, these are suggestions and recommendations, but we all recognize that each lab system is a little different and the timeline is slightly different with their accreditation processes. And the services they provide also vary from lab to lab with their resources. So I think it needs to be very clear. Are we asking them to review it? Are we asking more than that? Because again, recommendations, suggestions, very different than the shall that forensic labs know. Should and shall are different. So
my comment was going to be similar to that, but would it be more something we would take to ANAB and say, should these things be incorporated into your audit of the laboratories, or is this part of that scope? Because then it would be a shall.
Right, but I don't think it's in our purview to
Oh, we can
suggest
talk,
to
just a
ANAB,
discussion, not a
but
suggestion, discussion
yeah.
with ANAB. This is what we came up with as recommendations. Is this
But
something you're?
so ANAB comes in as an outside organization and they are reviewing documents in New York as they are any other state. So our review can't be any different, right? Like, sure, we're a special snowflake, but we're really not when it comes to when they come in and they're looking at our SOPs. So really, I think it kind of goes back to the lab level because we need to have that in our documentation if we're expecting them to, you know, ensure we are doing what we say and say what we're doing, kind of thing. So sure, you could have a conversation, but I don't think we should go into that conversation expecting to see NAB change the way their processes are.
But these recommendations are global, right? Like we have a subcommittee who's gone through and said that we'd like to, you know, we think these are recommended for New York State. However, this is something that is the same across all testing. So I'm just saying that it would be nice to see if ANAB is going to move towards incorporating any of this. And if they are, then we don't have to worry about it as much. It's just going to be part of your accreditation. And if they aren't, then we can just take those few and kind of focus on those.
I think this bleeds into what yesterday we discussed a little bit, and I think the answer is, I know, and I think, I don't want to speak for NAB, but I don't think that they would unless we, as a regulatory body, came up with a very specific checklist and said this is New York regulation. So I don't think so, based on how we heard about the process yesterday. How would, Aaron, I heard you say, you know, maybe a report out a year from now. Could we can ask for on the agenda, the biotech quarterly, and I don't know that they've set up a 2026 agenda meetings. If it's on an agenda and they have some, again, they only meet for 2 hours when they meet. So could we say, discuss and come back in a time like June or December of next year? Would you be open to that?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And just so we're very clear on, or at least how I articulate the ask, the others can obviously disagree, but I think what we want them to focus on is the response letter. We want them to see the places where it says either, you know, labs should be doing this, period, and see if any of them are not / disagree, or, you know, and where it says the BioTwig should take this up, or, you know, there's a number of places where it says, you know, we think the BioTwig should consider adding this, we think they should discuss this terminology change, you know, and the receptiveness to undertaking those conversations, making those changes to their documents and so forth. So again, I want to make space if they come back and they say, we disagree with the Blue Ribbon Panel and we disagree with the subcommittee. I think we should surface that. I don't think the idea is any of this has to be gospel truth if it doesn't work for our labs for some reason, but we should know why it doesn't work and understand, and then, you know, again, be able to make a judgment about which side we're on if there is a fight. But especially all the places where there's clear agreement, we should make sure our labs are doing those things, and where there is a sense of like, oh, this is a really good point, we should have the BioTwig have them discuss. So I guess what I'm saying is report back, you know, hey, we're in full compliance with all the things you think we're in compliance with. We disagree with these 3 suggestions, and we're taking up these 4 discussion points, you know, for the future. That's kind of the imagined response.
I just wanted to make a statement, follow up on that. So I haven't been in casework for a very long time, but I think we need to also say that just because they're suggestions and don't have shalls, that they shouldn't be done, right? That this is best practice from people that are global leaders in DNA analysis, right? This is best practice given resources, and resources can be limiting. All labs, and they do, should strive to reach those best practices, not just the minimum practices that are still acceptable. I just want to draw that distinction. Just because it doesn't have a shell doesn't mean there's no value in it.
Please, my question goes back to like why I was mentioning that is what would be our enforcement, and unless you put it into this is what's required for New York State, what would be the enforcement, and how would we audit it to see if they're actually doing it?
Do we need enforcement though, or could it be a collaborative exercise? And that's sort of the topic that is going to bleed over into the OSAC discussion. I mean, that's my opinion about it.
So how about a motion to ask the BioTwig to evaluate the recommendations that were provided to them. And kind of give a status report back to subcommittee and commission at some point in 2026. Do you want a specific point in 2026?
I mean, I think if it's realistic, the June meeting, but I don't know if that's realistic for when they meet.
Okay.
That is not realistic.
Okay, so September.
It's possible that they may have 2 meetings by then. This is only gonna come up at the first meeting.
Yeah.
And then you have to give each lab the opportunity to consider
Right.
it and then meet back and come up with a consensus. I think
By
the
the end
year
of
is very.
end of 2026.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and if they come back in September, they do. If they come back in December. they do.
And just to be clear, I think it's, there's sort of 2 prongs. One is the BioTwig, which is the mixture interpretation specifically, but the other I think is the laboratory directors, because there is the human factors report, which is broader. So it's kind of got 2, I understand the BioTwig is like the technical space for the mixture interpretation work. The human factors part is, I think, general.
That's also a BioTwig level thing as well.
Okay.
We rely a lot on our technical leaders and.
For all disciplines.
Yeah, wait, so are you specifically talking about DNA related, or are you?
No, I'm saying that because human factors report really touches every aspect of analysis, whereas the mixture stuff is specific to the bio.
Yeah. So again, we're also, now we're talking about lab-wide systems, and again, I don't want to speak for you guys, but
you can.
It's that is a huge undertaking for us to evaluate that is well.
I also
at a different level.
would say that document was titled Forensic DNA, so I would venture to guess that other disciplines in labs have not put their hands on that 400-page document.
Agreed.
But they just
there are other disciplines who have not read that.
So is the motion on the table to ask the BioTwig to consider and digest and report back by the end of 2026 on the 2 letters that were provided by the work groups subcommittee?
I will so move.
All right, Aaron makes that motion. Is there a second? Jessica seconds. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Thank you all. At this point, we'll take a brief break for police technical.
Good night. Before we, I'm sorry, holding everybody back from the, I just wanted to take a quick second to thank the commission for having us, inviting us, and for the thoughtful discussions. And again, I really appreciate that. I think I speak on behalf of everyone on the subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so a 5-minute break. It's 10:30, 10:35 or 10:36. We'll do our best. Just want to make sure that we have everyone back. Ms. Singer, if your camera is available or if you're there, could you move? And if not, we'll get started and just note for the record.
Okay, we are back recording on Zoom and live on YouTube. Ms. Singer, when you are ready, you can turn your camera and your microphone back on, and we are good to get started down in room 118.
Thank you, Taylor. Welcome back. We did go a little bit longer than 5 minutes. Apologies, but it was well earned. Yes, there was a line. Yesterday, we did hold an informational session regarding the OSAC registry. We heard from JP Jones of NIST and Pam Sale of ANAB and Dr. Rebecca Hartman from the Monroe County Medical Examiner's Toxicology Laboratory. The goal of the session was to gain a better understanding of the registry documents, implementation, and the status in New York to better inform the Commission's discussion on a plan presented by Dr. Marciano. So at this point, I'm just going to pass it over. This was your plan and your agenda item we were discussing last time. You want to kick us off?
I wrote some notes here, sure. So I thought the information session was excellent. We learned that many of the concerns labs have don't necessarily need to be concerns. And I would invite anyone who didn't attend the meeting to view it on YouTube. But I think one thing that I'd like to hear again stated at this meeting is the data that Lindsay presented yesterday regarding the survey of the labs. Would you mind?
Sure.
Following our meeting in September, the Office of Forensic Services collected information from each of the labs regarding implementation of standards from the registry within their systems. We did receive responses from all 22 accredited labs, and we focused our review on the published standards from the registry. Half of the disciplines accredited in New York State labs are fully or partially implementing all standards that are applicable to their laboratories. The remaining disciplines had several responses indicating that some standards have not been implemented. And while these disciplines did indicate that in those disciplines, it was only one or a handful of standards that were not implemented or evaluated. But those disciplines were fully or partially following a majority of the standards within their discipline.
Thanks, Lindsay. So as Erin said earlier, collaboration, I think, is the key. And I'd like to change my proposal based on this information. And it's clear that based on the lab feedback, one clear area that could help labs to receive resources to expand their quality system. I don't know what this would take the form of, but I understand the need to ensure labs are not significantly adversely affected through implementing standards like these. So this is my opinion. As everyone said yesterday, it's my opinion alone right now. I don't think requiring OSAC standard implementation at this point would be appropriate because we saw the level that the labs are at now. And the previous information we received didn't have that detail. And I know that was a lot of work for labs, so a huge thank you for that. But this does indicate or clearly demonstrate that they are already implementing either directly or indirectly. One other thing is I believe labs should indicate to the OSAC program office about their adoption. And it doesn't, like JP said yesterday, these are not individual standards. And I do want to also point out, I do respect and understand if labs choose not to, but it's a way to publicly bring positive light to your lab. So I don't understand, especially given the discussion that Pam and JP had with us, why this would be a bad thing. So what I would propose, again, this is up for discussion and input would be fantastic, would be a letter from the commission recommending that OSAC standards be implemented in the full or partial form based on the lab need or fit. I would also request that labs undertake an annual review of any new documents for an annual gap analysis and reporting of any move towards implementation of new standards. So that an educated decision can be made as to the value of implementing new documents. And I would ask that DCJS tracks this on an annual basis per discipline per lab.
Any comment or question? I think I'm going to just acknowledge that my team did a lot of work to do this. You know, the 22 labs responded. They reviewed the responses. It was a multi-page spreadsheet. And I know there was an ask yesterday to provide it. Between yesterday and today, we did sleep. And so we did not get it prepared to distribute. So if, you know, we can provide that via email at a later time, if you're interested in that. So I just want to acknowledge the work that went into it. It's doable. It's not undoable, or it's not unsurmountable, but it took effort and my staff time.
Thank you.
And this annual review, right? This is the first gap analysis, which is probably the most painful, right?
I do see you, Anne.
Well, I greatly appreciated the opportunity to listen in on yesterday's session. I was struck by the presentation from the OSAC committee about their perception about these standards and their appreciation that they're constantly evolving. that of the 290 some standards that are published, only about half of them are considered for the registry, and there are some on the registry that are being considered for change or perhaps even removal. But they come and they go and they evolve with the subcommittee's input. I left with my impression that these standards are excellent resources for the laboratories to consider in their own evolution. I mean, the standards themselves are evolving because the input from the subcommittees is evolving. There was no expectation on the part of OSAC that these are mandatory requirements to be implemented. There was no expectation, in my understanding, that any of the accrediting agencies, it would be up to them whether they would then consider any of these standards to be adopted in their accrediting process. So while I would absolutely agree that we should encourage our laboratories to review and be aware of and take advantage of the educational opportunities and the tools that OSAC offers to laboratories to best understand the standards and how they might assist the lab, I would not agree to a recommendation that we expect our New York State labs to implement them at this time. I think asking for periodic, could be annual, updates from the labs about what they think is missing, what they think could be added, would be of great value. But I think having any kind of commission communication that says we expect you to be moving towards implementing them, when we have no, I don't believe, commitment from ANAB, our surrogate accrediting agency, to adopt any of these additional standards in the criteria that they're going to use to accredit the labs. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Any other, Erin?
I favor Mike's proposal. It's hard to tell the daylight between what Ann said and your suggestion, because from my view, we should be saying to the labs, we hope you will implement these, but the really important caveat is full or partial based on your particular needs and fits. And I don't feel as though that, like, forecloses a lab's ability to say this doesn't work for us for some reason, or this is not a standard we agree with. And to the extent that there is like disagreement, I think we need to know about that, because these are, I think, the best practices. And it would be one thing if we were saying, like, tomorrow you have to have full implementation of all of these standards. But the thing that I found heartening about the materials in the discussion yesterday was it seemed like overwhelmingly labs were saying they were doing this, including, I mean, Lindsay's report just now. It seems like there's widespread adoption of many of these existing standards already. And so it feels to me that moving toward implementation is a good idea. If there is, or there is surfaced in this process something that suggests there's a problem with the standard, or it's not a useful standard in some way, I think both OSAC would benefit from knowing that. That was what I heard them say yesterday, as well as we would benefit from knowing that as an oversight body. And then lastly, on the ANAB point, I mean, this is kind of a chicken and egg problem in my view, because, you know, on the one hand saying, well, I heard ANAB to say essentially, you labs, you know, you pick the thing that applies to you, and then we just review if you're compliant with that thing. And it strikes me that if we have kind of general already implementation of you know, again, I think it was over half the disciplines fully or partially implementing these standards, and we encourage them to implement the remainder. If we think that's a timeline question, it doesn't sound like ANAB is going to say you're not accredited because you haven't implemented this standard, right? That which I would think would be a major concern. It sounds instead like what we're saying is, we think these are the benchmark standards, you should be implementing them. If for some reason there's a different standard that you think is a better benchmark or whatever, ANAB is going to accredit you if that is the standard you apply. And we would like to know, and OSAC should know, because there's clearly disagreement about the best standard. And so I don't see this as undermining, and I don't think we want to be mandating to ANAB, you know, what standard at this point until we at least surface disagreements about which standards should be applicable. So to me, there's enough flexibility built in the system, I guess I'm trying to say we think these are good ones, we should work toward them. If there's some reason why there's a departure, it is something we should know. And in the short term anyway, it doesn't compromise your accreditation status as long as you're following an established standard that's an alternative. So I would support this. The one question I had is whether your proposal included the report, like that we then ask the labs to do the survey essentially and become implementers in that way.
So in my proposal, I said that if labs felt like they should report it to OSAC, obviously that's up to them, though I think it's a positive thing, but their report would be assessing an annual review of new documents that came out through OSAC or any movement towards implementation of other standards, right, per discipline, right? Not listing the exact standards necessarily. Then we start getting into a lot of paperwork, right? But if we are tracking, right, this, labs are tracking this, at least there's demonstrated due diligence, which they already do, right? But there's demonstrated due diligence that there's a continued push towards reviewing new documents. There's not a lot of new documents that come out every year. I can tell you that from experience. So I don't know if I answered your question, but this would be a more generalized discipline per lab, per discipline, essentially survey that would be annual and would just demonstrate, you know, that there are standards, new standards have been implemented, direct or indirect, right? It doesn't matter again, because the spirit of what they're doing is maintaining that high quality they already have and evolving. Right?
Mine's just a very specific question about the implementation survey. Do you imagine they'll fill out the implementation survey?
For OSAC? That's I
That's up
can't
to the
answer that.
labs.
Yeah.
That's up to an individual lab.
But like whether we would ask them to essentially, not mandate if we don't have that power, don't have the will to.
I think the commission could encourage, but I don't think it should be a mandated thing. And I think there's a lot of concern from the labs themselves, excuse me, what it truly means to be listed as an implementer, or what is implied if they're not. Because again, this is one organization, and I think labs are leery to say, well, we all agree they are great guidance resources for us. I think we're very cautious to say they are the best guidance or best practice document that is out there, because there are other ones, and they alluded to that yesterday. SWGDAN, SWGDRUG, there are numerous lab or documents that we all use. So I think labs would be very cautious to say these are the standards that we think, and I think as a commission we should recognize that while we can encourage them to review them and implement what's appropriate and fit for their labs, I don't think the end goal should be full compliance for all of these standards, because if you've reviewed, I know we've reviewed the letters, that isn't appropriate for all situations. And it isn't just the resources, it isn't just the funding. Each lab has its own system, its own situation. Some of it is resources, some of it is other guidance documents that they're following. Some of it is what they have in place is better than the best practice that is published. And so I think that needs to continue to be in the lab's hands. What is in their SOPs, A&E comes in and they review that and they make sure we do what we're saying and we say what we're doing. And it doesn't matter if we're going to put an OSAC stamp on or an implementer stamp on. ANAB is going to look at our documents and determine whether or not we're following our SOPs. And so I think recommending and encouraging, and maybe even on the annual summary, a checkbox saying, you know, did this lab perform a review of current publications and implement, you know, additional materials, or maybe it's just at the review level. I think that's fair, but I don't think everybody sees these as the gold standard. Like, we're kind of throwing that term around, and I think there's a lot to it. You know, there's a lot of levels here. So, and I'm sorry if the letters, you know, didn't quite make that clear.
Pat, also has a comment.
So it's my last meeting, so I'm gonna make it good. So I think I've been fair to the defense on the commission. I hope I've been helpful and everything, so I kind of see myself in the middle all the time. So what I wanted to say first was that, and I can only talk about my own lab. I don't know why every other lab is 90% compliant or not, but we're compliant because we're compliant by chance. Because of ANAB, SWIG, ASTM, European standards, and I think I was pretty clear about that last meeting. Why are we pigeonholing OSAC, but telling the labs, forget about everything else? In terms of the once a year, I don't like that, because if I have a major issue in the lab, and SWIG doesn't help me, ASTM doesn't help me, I go to OSAC, right? I use all of my resources in order to find the best solution, or I go to NCBI and I find a paper on whatever the issue is, mass contamination, right? How are other places looking at contamination issues? So, you know, I think that we're getting back to the adoption. We're already adopting, and I think Pam said something really important. And she mentioned, look, if you have a SWIG recommendation in there, we're going to hold you to it. I've got SWIG all over my manuals. I have, you know, I've got all types of things that are external from ANA, right? And again, is it because of it we're hitting these standards? So the once a year thing, really, and the once a year to inform all of you commissioners, that's fantastic. But I don't think you should preclude, you know, the laboratory you shouldn't say the laboratory, look at these once a year, make sure that they are, you know, that there isn't something there that you want to use, or even better, what Mike said, let's give them a little improvement, right? Let's send some notification to OSAC and say, we don't agree with this, and so forth. So the last thing I wanted to say was, and I have to quote John Collins directly, and John Collins is one of the best, I think, trainers, because he's just, I mean, I'm not getting paid by John Collins. I don't think John Collins is listening, but I think John Collins is one of the excellent people who come into a laboratory. And no matter how many standards, right? If we I think we're already overstandardized. You overstandardize the field even more, I don't think it's going to help the problems that we're having right now. Right? Lydia said, what's the issue? Is ANAB not working, right? I don't think adding more standards is going to help us. This OSAC project, and I have nothing against having to do it again, but it was the third time we did it, right? I'm now like 30 days higher in my turnaround, right? Everybody was off the ship. There were too many standards to finish this for the time period we had. Almost everybody was off pace. So again, I don't mind when ASCLD went to ANAB and then ISO rolled in. I had the same feeling, but once ISO was done, I said, wow, how did we do this before? Like, how did we do this before? I'm not feeling that in this particular situation. I use OSAC standards, but I'm not forced to use them. But if I'm forced to use them, I'm still going to use the rest of the resources that I have. Why aren't we talking about those resources too? So that's the only thing I have to say. It's just, again, I'm you know, my last day here, I'm not retiring as a director, but it impacts me too. It really does, because the tension in the laboratory of people coming to us saying, look, we just did this exercise and we spent all this time, and in the end, we're like 96% compliant. And then the 4%, we had great reason. I think we had great reasons for not using it. And I brought up using the average rather than the lowest point in a measurement, right? Why would I use the average if it doesn't support defense, right? You would use the lowest number. If I could, I'd use the highest number, right? Or the lowest number for barrel length. Sure, I want it to be illegal, right? And I'm not speaking like I try to push casework, but that's my 2 seconds in terms of my opinion on standards. I think they're a great resource, like SWIG has been since I was 23 years old in this field. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, I had just a question about the scope of this proposal, because if a laboratory chooses to have partial implementation and you're asking them to survey every year and provide their current implementation status, or is there an expectation that we eventually want them to go to full? Do they have to justify why they haven't gone to full? Like, what's the ask? What's the total ask here of the laboratories? And I do agree, every year would be burdensome. You know, especially if there's not significant changes over the course of a year or even 24 months. But I'm just like, so we're asking them to at least do partial, but is there any expectation to go ever to the full implementation? And do they have to justify it if they don't? I mean, what's really this recommendation is take it or leave it, these standards. That's really what it sounds like. So I'm not sure that that a proposal is even needed. It is to me voluntary to adopt these standards.
And I think that's what we're saying.
Recommendations.
So right.
Sorry.
At the first, at no point did I ever propose full adoption. At no point. My goal was to put it in the lab's hands for their choices, for their situation, because all labs are different. I want to be very clear about that. OSAC documents represent technical documents as well. And OSAC, to put it another way, is a thing. It's been around. It is sponsored by NIST, who everyone last week, right, was talking about how NIST are the experts, right? And they are. There are other experts as well. And a lot of them sit as volunteers on OSAC committees. I was one. And again, there are a lot of other people who want. So to discount the value of these, I think is not a good direction to go. That being said, some of the criticisms are absolutely true. They don't necessarily, some standards don't necessarily fit labs based on their operations, right? Or there's disagreement that there are other better ways to do things. That's fine. I would, having to review a new OSAC standard or two every year if they came out, to me does not sound burdensome. I am not a lab director. I am not a casework analyst anymore. All that does is ensure that there is attention being paid to what those are. And I think a lot of the issues with OSAC implementation stem from not being familiar with the content, right? And I'm not saying this in terms of New York State labs. I'm saying this in general. It's a lot to take in. And it seems like the heavy lift was done in the last 3 months.
I was just gonna ask that clarifying question. So what you're proposing, there's a base level established in the records that OFS maintains. And we would be looking to interact, like reach out to the labs at some point next year and say, here's the new things. Did you look at them? If you did you have an opinion? If you didn't, could you look at them? Would you look at them, or just to see where they got between our ground level that we looked at this year and the new in 2026? Is that what you're asking?
It's a survey. No, you're not being accredited to it, right? You're not being audited to it. And it's a recommendation for implementation where it applies, right? Where value is. There's no need to require. Clearly, the labs are doing this already, whether they did or not. Not to say that quality was ever in question, right? But to pay attention to these newer compared to the ISO technical documents, there is value in that, in my opinion.
I just wanted to talk to how a survey would be taken, because if you ask for an opinion on the survey, a lot of times any survey like that, I can't answer that. That has to go, as the lab director in my field, I can't answer that survey without putting all my responses above. an opinion is an opinion, and a lot of times they don't want you to put your opinion in that. So answering it in terms of this is what we're doing, that's fine. Answering in terms of, well, I chose this over that because of this, because I think this is better, that I probably wouldn't put in a survey. I'd be happy to talk to you about that verbally, but putting it in a written survey, probably not.
I don't think that we're asking for that detail, at least I'm not.
I think some people had mentioned it.
I definitely did.
Those are, I think that the survey that was sent out was very fair. It was, and like, I'm speaking about a survey that some of us have seen. It's a survey that lists the standard. And it was, does your lab full, partial, NA, no? And if it was partial, NA, or no, just a brief comment is required. The full, there was no comment. And the comments, and I can't speak for the way everybody filled it out, but the comments from my lab were, if it was NA, maybe we don't have that technology, okay? And if it's partial, it's, this is still under review, or what we have is better, or we follow Swig drug, or, you know, all of the above. There were a lot of reasons, you know. And if it was a no, maybe it was, and for my lab, you know, it was a lot of the training documents, and it was, well, we haven't updated our training documents because we haven't trained anybody, and this would be considered, you know, or reviewed at the time that is being done, or something. I'm giving examples, but I think a survey at that level is fair and appropriate if the new published documents were listed, and, you know, whether it be annual or whatever, we're asked to consider those. But I don't think the push should be, the end goal should be full implementation, because as we've heard, it doesn't necessarily work for everybody.
So I hear that, and I don't want to slow things either by asking. I think what you just described would more than satisfy me in terms of just understanding a kind of why that isn't like a super opinion why, but it is just like we follow this way.
It's just factual.
Yeah,
Right,
factual.
right. And there's no judgment either, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, you don't have that, or okay, you haven't reviewed it yet, or okay, maybe it's a full assessment, so we didn't get to it this year, right? It doesn't mean we think this is terrible. I think the general consensus amongst lab directors are, these are very useful resources. They are great guidance documents, as others are, right? And and they were already implemented. I don't think many of us made quick changes to say, hey, we're implementing them. They were already written into our SOPs because we're following the best practices. And that's how we're ensuring quality, because ANAB is coming in and that's what they're accrediting us to, is our written SOPs.
I think for me, the idea of the OSAC model, I do probably have slightly more desire for it to be the aspiration. There might be more disagreement there. But what I think is very helpful about it in this kind of exercise is that the problem with like there being multiple standards is it gives a grab bag approach that makes it very hard for an oversight body to figure out whether that's good grabbing that's happening. You know, so we heard JP give the example yesterday of the discontinued SWIGs. And, you know, there could be some SWIG guideline from a decade ago that a lab is following because of lack of information or inertia in the lab or whatever. And it's a legitimate standard, but it's not a standard that we want to endorse in our state. It's not going to make our state a leader in this field. We want people to be, you know, using better standards. And so something like this exercise where we say, here is what we think of as an aspirational set of standards, but that leaves room for a lab to say, that one's actually not good, there's a better one, and we use it. It will give us some purchase on that, because we'll be able to see, okay, for this one standard, our 22 labs actually don't follow it. They follow this other standard. And that gives us some insight into either like, oh, wow, they follow a SWIG standard from a decade ago. We need to address this in our laboratory structure. Or conversely to say, you know, they're making good choices. We love this. This is a better standard. And that's why I think for me, it's important we don't want to right now hem in labs to follow exclusively OSAC standards that either don't fit them or are not, in fact, we think the best standards. But in the absence of like an aspirational set of benchmarks, I think it's just very hard to make those determinations. The mere statement I'm following something else doesn't give us any insight. So I very much like the format that it's been described, and I think it would be helpful and important to understand where the departures are taking place without the nuance of like this and that, but more with an understanding if we do this instead.
If I could just respond to that, something that I think, well, a few minutes ago I said New York isn't a special snowflake, right? When ANAV comes in the door, New York is a little bit of a special snowflake in that we have the technical working groups. So I completely understand your concern. We don't want a protocol from 10 years being followed. But I can tell you the purpose of these technical working groups is to talk about current methods, current papers, current reporting statements, difficult cases, testimony, all of the current topics. And so I think we need to put a little bit of faith in that those discussions are happening. And the other thing is any of us who have been through an ANAV assessment is while they are making sure we do what we say and we say what we do, they're also providing, often it's conforming with comment. If they see perhaps the lab would benefit from an improvement while we're meeting the standard, but your lab may benefit from whatever, right? And so yes, you're being accredited, but you know, and labs take those into consideration when they move forward. So I just want to give you some sort of assurance that there is no procedure or discipline that is sort of being tucked away in the corner and not being regularly part of conversations, part of current technology, current research. And again, ANAV comes in with technical assessors, and there are a lot of open discussions about that. So while they're not telling us how to do it, they are certainly also resourceful when they come in. So as an insider, I hope you understand that is happening.
If I could just add to that, with some of our recent ANAV visits, if there's something that's noted within a particular discipline, especially with my smaller sections where we really have, you know, tens of items of cases submitted as opposed to hundreds, they will comment on, well, how are you keeping up your proficiency? How are you, you know, if all we're doing at this point is maybe doing mock samples that we're creating because we're not actually getting cases, but we are loath to let go of that particular test because, gee, you never know. But then we do have to then take a look at ourselves and say, is this worth keeping on our scope of accreditation because we just aren't getting the cases? So we're getting that type of input as well, where it's like, well, you know, you really need to think about this. You really, you know, why are you holding on to this? When one of my very first things when I came into Westchester County was that I actually hadn't started, but it was like, hey, you're going to be the lab director, and the recommendation is stop crime scene. Because, you know, there had been no crime scene visits in 10 years. So why are you keeping it on your scope, right? So it was, oh, great. All right. I got to make a big decision. But it was important that I was involved in that decision because it was directly affecting the laboratory. I also want to give a shout out to Office of Forensic Services because they are inundating us with training sessions. And I mean that in the best possible way. But it's like, here's every week. Here's a new training, here's new training for this section, here's a new training for this discipline, so that we are current with what is going on out there. And I think that definitely lab directors are saying, you know, hey, is this, you know, why are we still doing this? Again, newbie in a laboratory, something comes up, and then it's like, how long have we been doing? How long has the lab been doing this before I got here? Why, you know, does this need to stay like this? Do we need to tweak it? Or do we need to say sayonara to this particular technology or technique? So I think that we are constantly being presented with opportunities to refine what it is that we're doing in the laboratory. I don't want to go off on too far of a tangent, but I don't want it to think like, you know, to seem as though we're stagnant and not keeping up. The only thing is the time frame in which maybe it's hope that we would adopt certain things. I see this to be a heavier lift. It's like, I want to consider it. I really did find yesterday's meeting extremely helpful. I don't know if all of the labs had an opportunity to watch the video, and I would like them to see what was discussed. Because I learned some things about OSAC that I didn't know about, and I have somebody in my old lab who goes to all the OSAC meetings, but it wasn't really it wasn't integrated into the lab other than, oh yeah, so-and-so's going to an OSAC meeting. So in that realm of, what does implementation mean, and what does a standard mean, right? One of the things that JP said was, oh, standard can mean many things, right? So what are you supposed to do with that? So all of these things that was explained to us in some detail, and it's like, all right, I have a better understanding of what it is that is hoped for aspirationally. Let's see if I can find one note that I took. So in a question that I had about overlaps in standards suggested by OSAC versus what we're already doing, he explained that their documents provide what should be included in a lot more detail. So it's intended to help a lab in the implementation of a standard. So it might be, ANAB might just say, do this thing. And then OSAC is saying, and here's how you do it, right? So if we're saying, well, we already did this, we may not have done it the way you suggested that it be done, but we've done something. So I'm not averse to continuing this conversation. I would just like to maybe suggest the same sort of time frame to okay, we're moving on from, hey, here's, please review what you're doing and see how it lines up with OSAC, to, okay, what can we give you informationally about what it is that we're doing, or what we're going to try to do to look at these standards going forward. So one question is, can we have some time to now, even if it's just maybe 3 months, the next meeting, to say, okay, we've looked at this and we're open to some sort of suggestion. And then Mike, are you asking for us for laboratories to only look at new standards going forward so we're not.
Because you already did.
Right, okay.
I mean, that's all the existing is done.
Right. But one of the things that I believe OSAC also wanted us to do is say, well, if we're saying we're already doing it, they want us to say that we're implementers of it. Correct me if I'm
So
wrong.
what I think is, we don't worry about what OSAC says. We worry about what New York says.
Okay.
And in my opinion, you do what's best for you, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, that's fair.
Yeah,
So I
that's my
think
opinion.
having a bright line that's saying, all right, going forward, if a new standard is promulgated by OSAC, you want the laboratories to look at it and to consider.
So a couple things I've heard, and this is a multi-year conversation we've had.
Yes.
So from last year's conversation, I think we've made progress. I think Mike has expressed he's much more confident in what he's heard recently than what he heard a year ago.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
A year ago, this conversation was very different. So we've made progress in that realm. We also know that the Twigs have this as an agenda item. They look at the standards and they have conversation. So if we could get to a point, maybe right now, where we still have progress to be made, and a year from now, OFS could come back with a new report out of that progress that's been made, and throughout the year, the Twigs can do what they do all of the time, and then we can provide back a report with a new survey. Would that satisfy multiple concerns and where everyone's at? And I've heard people acknowledge that you're doing this. You're looking at these documents, you're evaluating to see if they make sense, and you're removing ones that don't when you need to slow things down or change a discipline or close a discipline, or there's progress being made on both sides of these, implementing new and keeping old or disregarding old. Could we get to some sort of motion like that and then revisit this in December of 2026 with a report out?
I think that's completely fair. I do think the commission should take a stance on recommending them, not requiring them. But I think it's part of our mission, right? In a sense. And we're not recommending full implementation or partial implementation. We're recommending that there is implementation on some level reported to no one, in the public arena, right? Necessarily OSAC. But I feel strongly that we should take we should make a formal statement about recommendations, because everyone here, every single person here, in one shape or another said there is definitely merit in those, right?
But has the commission done similar recommendations for SWIG or for other resources, right? So like,
don't know that.
So that's the question of like, to what extent does an endorsement, even in recommendation fashion, weigh on, a lab saying, okay, in my mind, it's like all the things that Pat talked about were the different Google resources that he goes to when he's facing a problem. And this is one solution set that's there and available. I think to Shelley's point around, and similar to Ann's point and comment yesterday, having this be one of those foremost entities that is consulted by the lab directors makes a lot of sense. But we now just have a baseline. And I think a good action step for the March meeting would be kind of having shared the survey. That way we can have a conversation about, okay, where are the areas of daylight where we see some labs are doing more of these standards, but not those. And then, have this meeting be about, okay, we do want to commit to next year having evaluated, again, the labs by surveying them, seeing where they are. And maybe it makes sense for the commission to say, here are a variety of resources that lab directors should consult as they encounter issues or encounter new disciplines. And so, OSAC registry would be one among several that we could work on, and maybe we could solicit or request from the TWIGs a listing of those.
I see Stephen, who has had his hand up and has not yet shared his thoughts.
Thank you. I think that it is important for us to make some sort of statement. The nature of what it is different, but this is a cultural issue. I mean, what we've seen is great from the labs, right? But there's an expectation that there be some statement from our commission. And even if that statement is reporting back what we've just observed and seen, and that we would like the lab directors to continue to examine these guidelines as well as the other guidelines, is something that we encourage, and that we're going to continue to investigate the status of the implementation of these guidelines. And we continue to seek your input. So it's a cooperative venture, so that the labs feel that this is not antagonistic, but this is something that we appreciate and we want to facilitate in any way we can. I think it's a cultural thing.
I would say, I would prefer if it came out as we would recommend like an annual review based on this non-exclusive list of resources, like you were saying, and just list a number of resources. But I wouldn't say implementation, I would say a review so that they can implement if they see a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. Implementation, if it fits, right? Same.
Right. But if we recommend implementation, that's saying one thing. If we recommend review,
Consideration.
Consideration,
Yeah. I didn't mean to say something that's exactly what my thought is, because the lab knows best what's best for each lab is going to have its own assets and limitations, right? And it's important for them to make those decisions.
So is Erin?
I mean, I just want to articulate, I think we should recommend them. I really do. Texas recommended it. I think the Texas Forensic Science Commission is a strong, exemplary commission. I think their labs, which were a disaster, are now some of the strongest in the nation. And I don't think that there's a reason not to. I think we can recommend and leave space for departure or justified, disagreement. I will obviously vote for softer language because I think this is important, but I have not yet heard a reason why we think these shouldn't, I've heard reasons why there might be justified departures, but I have not heard like strong reasons why I think these are not the aspirational standards in a general sense. You know, that we're not saying required implementation. We're not saying no grounds for departure. We're not saying cannot imagine a better standard out there. We're saying this is the recommended package of standards we think labs should follow. We would like to hear from you about any places where you do not agree. And like, look, if it came back and it turned out we're not actually overwhelmingly in the compliance, maybe that's an occasion to revisit our recommendation, you know, or if they start changing the standards and we think they've now become lousy and actually some other body is doing a better job of making standards. But I think they should be the recommended package with grounds for departure. But like I said, I'm gonna go along with whatever we can get.
So is there a motion specifically, or are we tabling? I think we need to decide and move forward. Specific motion.
I'm going to make a specific motion that's a complete departure from what we were just talking about.
Okay.
And all this is essentially tabling, but I think maybe because of, there's a lot of people talking about very, very similar things, but there's still some minor disagreements. Rather than force a motion now for this, it might be a better idea to form a small working group with very limited meetings to try to workshop this and present a motion at the March meeting to the commission that gives the appropriate time to discussing these particular topics. That is going to be my motion.
So the motion on the table is to table the plan discussion and have a small working group to get the proper language workshop for the March meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Call for a vote. All in favor of the motion to table and
You might want to do individual.
Okay.
Since we got it.
Yep. We'll do a roll call vote. Is there a discussion?
No, if you are. So do we already have a motion that was second?
No.
So then there's no, we don't need to make a motion to table something that wasn't on the floor.
So it's not tabling. The only motion on the floor is to formulate a small working group to continue the conversation, to workshop a language to be discussed in March.
I guess I don't know how different we're gonna be from where we are. I mean, I think I'm hearing the general consensus is we want labs where we'd like to recommend that labs review it on a regular routine basis, whatever we decide that to be. I think we've already discussed that, you know, perhaps a survey type form would be an appropriate way to gather that information from labs. I guess I'm a little unsure what a subcommittee is going to.
So I guess
change
that's my issue is for everyone's point, there's a counterpoint, right? It's bouncing around the room, and there's clearly, we're talking about very similar things here. But if small details are going to, in my opinion, derail a motion that might not consider the wording of the recommendation, then why not give the appropriate time to try to come up with that for a full detailed proposal? And that's my opinion about that, I guess I would say.
Any other comment before I do a roll call?
Are we expecting for this to just be a first step, or is there room for modification?
This is a first step, right? I mean, this is something to be presented to the commission.
I mean, to me, the goal of that working group the goal of the working group at this point would be similar to what Michelle was saying, is like, we just need to get started. And so it seems like we've had enough discussion to start.
And that's fair.
Right? So can we start and then adjust as opposed to talk about starting
to start.
Can I check, if, as I understand, Mike, what you're imagining, and I just want to say my understanding of it, if others disagree, is that like, if what we're disagreeing on is some people are okay with some kind of idea of review, and other people, myself, want it to be more of a recommendation, then maybe there's like wording that can somehow thread a needle between those positions that would make everyone feel okay. Like if the review people could be brought a little here and the recommend people could be brought a little here, there might be wording that is more than just look at and less than recommend that could satisfy everyone. Is that right? And that's what
That's
the motion.
what we're talking about right now, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. There's some is wording of things, and if we're not going to vote on the wording, right, is that going to cause this whole discussion to get derailed in some way, shape, or form? So rather than have that take place, considering all the work that's been done up to this point, why don't we focus? There's no rush, right? There's no rush. Why don't we focus on optimizing?
How about another idea? Could we, instead of forming a full working group, elicit your proposals and then we can crystallize them in OFS if everybody sends how they would word it, and then we try to
I
crystallize it?
retract my motion.
I think that's really smart, because I think depending on who's sitting in the subgroup, because there are some different opinions here, right? And so I think hearing from everybody, and I think that was my concern with the subgroup is, okay.
Well, you get a representative group-ish.
Right, like, yeah, so I think hearing from everybody is a better way to go.
Make it your own adventure?
Yeah, if you have language that you think is appropriate, submit it and then put it in front of everyone at the next meeting.
But I was gonna say, is it like we draft the letter and send it along as we would write the letter?
Should we vote now on the kind of thing we agree on, or should we defer till we?
But that's, I mean, up to you guys.
We just do it in an informal solicitation. How many people here agree that we ought to survey the labs about their compliance? Raise your hand. Okay, so we have a motion, or we have a consensus of that. I mean, so would that be a place to start, and then we can come back? I mean, what I drafted to myself was a motion for the commission to direct OFS to conduct an annual review of the laboratory's compliance with OSAC standards and share such review results with the commission for discussion. So that would be.
It was supposed to be consideration, not
consideration.
Exactly.
So for laboratories, consideration.
But Michelle's format too, I think is important, like the format described.
That's how I would envision
Yes,
it.
I agree.
I'm not looking, yeah, I think that review worked, especially if we're gonna focus on new standards, right? Like every time something published comes out, if you use that format, here are the new ones in 2026 or since the last survey. Where do you guys are? Are you full, partial, NA, no? I think that's manageable. Yes. On a lab level. It is not manageable to redo what we just did.
But there's no reason.
Yeah, there's no reason
to.
I'm glad we all agree on that.
But shouldn't there be consideration if there's any new standards coming out with SWIG dam or any other?
I agree
working
with
groups?
that
It should be
too.
all of them. All the
Right.
recommendations should be reviewed.
And
If
he
there's something
specifically
like
said
that.
it yesterday, right? He specifically said SWIG dam, SWIG drug.
And
Those are
to
still.
be fair, the SWIG dam guidelines, if you're not following them, you can't utilize CODIS. So all of our labs are following the SWIG dam guidelines.
Right.
That's step one into entry.
I think those are just as important. They just don't have a implementer status on those. So we don't know how many labs are following those and how many labs are partial of both of those, right? OSAC.
If they're following them all, right, if they go with CODIS.
Right. So my point is, there's only feedback for the OSAC. There's no feedback we see about who's implementing and what they're not implementing with the other guidance documents, which we rely heavily on.
And frankly, this discussion is about OSAC too, right? I mean, I think that's been established. So if labs want to comment on these, I would say great. But I think if we focus here, at least for me, is OSAC, because it's multidisciplinary, right? Established through NIST, but not directed by NIST nor enforced by NIST. This is a thing, right? It's an established group. not detracting from.
But then commenting on one set of suggestions from this group is what I have an issue with. That's why I think it should be one of many.
If there was a vote, I would continuously vote no until they were over. I'm not asking the labs, and again, I think what's being asked now is that we have an annual audit for OSAC, right? And Mike, you're saying that
I don't see it that way at all.
Aren't you saying that, hey, nothing really changes, so you're only gonna have to look at the new stuff? That's an annual audit, right? You gotta look at it at some point. How are we supposed to know that the new standards are there?
Yeah, I mean, not really sure how to respond to that.
The twig groups.
It's not the same. Yeah.
I have a hard time with that too, because the twig groups have that as a standing agenda item from NICLAC. The NICLAC group determined to add that to every twig's agenda. So when new documents come out, you must be assessing them in your labs. If your twig members are discussing them quarterly, you can't meet that. Can't meet that requirement if you're not.
Can I just give one concrete example that may or may not be illuminating? I don't think it's anyone surprising here to know that I have a little bee in my bonnet about source attribution. OSAC standard for latent, for friction ridge analysis has clear statements about not doing source attribution. It borrows the ASB 013 standard. I'm a little confused about whether there's confusion in the conversations I have with labs about what they're doing, whether they have read that standard and interpreted it in a different way than I believe it is stated. I'm really curious in this document if on the line for the OSAC standard that says do not do direct source attribution, every single lab in our state says we don't follow that. We follow some other standard out there that says you can do source attribution. If I see that, I think we as a commission should have a conversation about whether we think that's the right standard for our labs to be following. If 4 labs are doing source attribution and the remainder of the 22 are not, I think that's insightful for us to go back to those 4 labs and say, we understand you're doing a recognized standard, but we think it's a bad standard. So that's like a very concrete way of using the benchmark of OSAC to surface places where labs may be doing things that I personally think are scientifically unsupported, where existing other best practices are out there. And I'm not saying this is a lab going rogue. I'm saying they're just following a different standard. That's not one that I think we should be following. How you get that information directly across a wide array of disciplines, a wide array of laboratories, I think I don't want labs to have to go through, for instance, every single policy they have and report where it's coming from. I think this is a very organized way to surface major areas of disagreement and for this commission to then be able to exercise some oversight in places where we are in agreement, things are not going the way they should. So that's the benefit of the exercise as I see it. At the minimum level that I think we're coming to consensus about. At the higher level, I tend to like the OSAC standards. And so I would put a little thumb on the scale of, this is the standard we think is a good one. Let us know if you disagree. But I'm willing to let that part go even just to surface the initial thing of let's just use this as a checklist against which you can put no, we don't follow that one. And we can see for ourselves whether there's a good reason. And maybe we have a conversation with a twig about how come all the labs are doing this,
So are we out of place? Joe has a new.
I have a revised. A motion for the commission to direct OFS to conduct an annual survey of the laboratory's review and consideration of new or revised OSAC standards and share such review results with the commission for discussion to continue to advance the delivery of forensic sciences.
Second.
Someone needs to make.
You can't make the motion. I know. That's my text message to my wife. So.
Can you just say standard, including OSAC and others?
Sure, go ahead.
Again, I just don't like that. I can't vote on this either, but I don't like specifying OSAC standards. If we say review of new standards, including OSAC, whatever else.
I would need clarity for us because is it the ISO documents? Is it whatever SWGDAM's putting it, the 4 SWGs we heard about yesterday? We have to follow those 4 SWGs. And what others
It wouldn't be the
So we don't
ISO,
have to have an
we're
exclusive.
already, those are.
No, I saw we heard about yesterday,
So-
2104.
okay.
Should we ask even more though? Right?
yeah.
I mean, shouldn't we baby step this whole thing? And we could with OSAC.
Well, can we say applicable SWIGs? Or pertinent SWIGs?
I feel like we just limit it to, I think we maybe, like, let's just have a clear set, you know,
As a
then-
starting point.
yeah, and then if it turns out it's not a huge part, if it's easy, whatever, but like, I worry about a world in which now OFS has to go canvas all the world of possible standards and see whether there's any new ones, and then go back to test labs, and then the labs are like, we don't even, that's like a European standard we don't even use, and, you know, not to dispute.
We also just flip it, so the motion, newer revised standards, including OSAC, and leave it open, so if we have further discussion in March and June, because we'll probably do this in the fourth quarter, or third or fourth quarter of next year, so.
But also too, OFS is always a part of the twigs, right? And so if there are documents that the twigs are talking about that they speak highly of, you know, then that leaves the space for
Sure.
something that a technical working group finds to be.
And that would be the
significant
space
and
for us to hear it. That would be, for, you know, the best place for us.
important. And that's where it should come. Yeah.
I'm ready. I would like to make a motion for the commission to direct OFS to conduct an annual survey of the laboratory's review and consideration of new or revised standards, including OSAC, and share such review results with the commission for discussion to continue to advance the delivery of forensic sciences.
And you withdraw your prior.
And I withdraw my prior.
Second.
Okay. All right, roll call or just, yes,
Just roll.
okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Online,
Aye.
thank you, Commissioner. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Ann vote, she said aye.
Oh, I'm an aye, I'm an aye.
I'm an and.
Oh, behind you.
The other end.
Alright. So everyone has voted, motion carries. Thank you all for that conversation. Up next, new business.
Another break.
Another break.
This is a hefty meeting.
It is a hefty meeting. This,
We're still submitting wording to you, right? Or no?
no,
We're done. You voted.
you made it the motion.
Okay.
And you made the motion.
That was only part of what we were talking about, so I think that's relevant.
The other part,
The other part was our recommendations. That was the survey, right?
that's the survey and the recommendations. Well, yes, you're right. Because I also heard a letter of thanks to the labs for what they've done. That part's tabled.
Yeah.
All right. ANAB, next up is ANAB's Audi. It was not a typo, if you saw that on your agenda. This is just kind of informational because this is the end of the year and next year you will see very different documents. And we're working with ANAB on that. ANAB is moving into a new online platform, Audi, to streamline their accreditation and assessment activities. As labs transition into the new platform, documents received by the Office of Forensic Services might look different. Pam Sale is here today. She was here yesterday to give a brief overview and information on the new platform. Brief because we still have lots of agenda items. Pam.
I can keep it very brief. So yes, our new database called Audi. It looks like it's spelled wrong. It's not. We even have our own little robot logo that goes along with it. So yeah, this new database is going to help ANAB with just process efficiency. It is a company-wide database. It's not just forensics. We're a very large company. We've been doing things different for many years. We're all going to be following the same process so we can automate and have efficiencies for our staff. So it's going to add workflows to help us out with things. And I'm going to tell you, give you some examples of how that might impact the types of records from what you normally see to what those records are going to look like and how the communications are going to differ. It's really going to reduce our direct email communication with the laboratories. and that's probably gonna be the biggest difference, that DCJS and or the commission sees, with the records for assessment activities in the future. So right now, it's kind of a hybrid process, just getting into the database. We're running some of our activities. We're running our activities through that, but you know, they started a while back, and so you know, the old process took place. Now it's the same process, but maybe it's more automated. So an example of that is we now have automation that will allow us to populate the assessment team in Audie and have the system send a generic email to the laboratory representative that tells them they have a task to do in Audie, and they need to log in and review that team and tell us whether or not they have objections to any of those people. Previously, those team names would have been in an email and sent to the laboratory for the same purpose. That might have been 10 different emails, depending on how big the team was, how many times we had to go back and forth. So this is gonna eliminate a lot of that direct email from ANAB staff to the laboratory, tracking that information back and forth. It will all be contained within our system. So those communications that we previously copied DCJS on because it was regarding accreditation, we won't be copying DCJS on because it's just an automated email from Audie that says, you're the task owner, you have a task, go in and do it. So it wouldn't provide any information to DCJS about what was going on. And we don't have a way to email anybody other than the task owner. The task owner is the one who has to go in and do that.
If an automated response goes back to Audie, let's say the person is out on extended leave or whatever, is there a way for your agency to recognize that email went, there was an automated return on it?
I will check on that. My initial thought is no. I believe it is a do not reply email that comes from.
Okay, it's just a concern because typically with those, you have a certain number of days to respond, whether or not you have a concern. Mm-hmm. And so you may interpret that as the lab has no concern, but maybe the intended receiver didn't get the automated.
Yep. I will follow up on that. I would say that I agree. It's a 5 business days. If we don't hear back, that means we can move forward with those people. If at some point you said, no, wait, we didn't see this name, we have an objection, we're still gonna listen to your objection, right? We're not gonna be like, no, you missed it. We would still wanna know, because we can't send people who have a conflict of interest. Okay. So we would wanna know that.
Thank you.
But I will follow up on that. I will tell you, we had meetings earlier this week, and one of the things that we want to do as an enhancement to our system is to allow collaborators. So if the task is assigned to you, you as the lab representative could add collaborators for those types of tasks so that other people who could at least log in and see that. But the task owner is the only one who can move the workflow forward. But I'll find out on auto responses what happens with those. So that's one example. Report format is not going to change. We're still using our mnemonic application for reports, but the difference will be that report will get uploaded into Audie. It's not going to be emailed, at least at some point. I think right now they may still be emailing some of those, but as we move into the system, the report will be available. Laboratory representative can download it. It's just not that email going back and forth that DCJS gets copied on. Another example would be challenges to nonconformities. Those will be done within the Audie system, right in a workflow. It'll have the nonconformity. There's a place for the laboratory to push a button that they want to challenge, and then they have to fill out some information on why they're challenging it and provide that supporting documentation. So again, less back and forth through email. The team leader or actually that one goes to ANAB. So ANAB and the laboratory rep, we may still have communications outside of Audie, which we can certainly copy DCJS on, but communications pushing that workflow back and forth within Audie are going to be the preference, right? We want to say, oh, we need more information. We're going to push the workflow back. The lab's going to get it and be like, okay, here's my response to the request for additional information. The certificate and scope format are not going to be changing at this point. Again, there will be right now we're still manually typing those up and providing them to the laboratory, but at some point in the future, that will be automated as well. So as soon as we make the accreditation decision, that certificate and scope will be live on our website and be available for the lab for anybody to download. So I just want to make the commission aware that there's going to be a difference in the communications going back and forth. Things might look a little different as we get into the coming year with what you see in your packet of information that DCJS may provide you for your consideration and the decisions that you need to make. Just because we're not automatically copying DCJS doesn't mean we won't get DCJS information that they need for tracking purposes and the information that the commission needs for their information and decision purposes. It's just going to look different. Some of it may be, you may see a more harmonized format in the information that you get now. And so that might be even better for the commission. Like all of the ANAB records look the same because the labs are all having to respond in the same format to us within our automated system. But we'll definitely be working with DCJS, like I said, to make sure that we're communicating the information that is needed. I didn't want you to be surprised, over the next few months at your next meeting, some of the documents may or may not look different from what you normally would see. And so we thought the explanation in advance of that would be beneficial to avoid confusion or concern.
I know I'm the question person, sorry. Just a quick question. Do you use AI at all? And is any of this in this sort of world of imagining the use of AI?
We actually, ANAB has a task group right now on use of AI, but we do not use AI with our CAB records, with any document that is copyrighted and stuff. We have to be very careful that we're not adding to that learning function of AI because we have confidentiality agreements. And so right now, no. Would we could I see some AI usage within our own database system in the future that will make our lives easier and getting information transferred back and forth? Probably. But we're just getting into the AI realm, and even our legal department, is very cautious about what we do. We have an AI policy, right? And so we have to follow that and make sure, like I said, the confidentiality of our CAB information, proprietary information is really important for us to maintain.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I see both benefits and risks. And I think that speaking for myself as a commissioner, I would want to know if it's being deployed as it's being deployed, just so that we are cited on that.
Yeah, we're not using it in assessment activities at this point. So we definitely keep you informed. Thank you.
It's just an informational question. I'm just wondering if this new database, is it foilable or?
So ANAB is not foilable.
And just on our end at OFS, the team's been doing a needs assessment on what documents we currently get and what we need to provide, and so that we can work with ANAB and with the labs, so that we still get the same information in that different mechanism. But so we've been working on this for a little while, a couple months. All right, thank you very much for joining us again today. Okay. Up next, we have the next generation sequencing validation. At the May 2nd, 2025 DNA subcommittee meeting, the New York State Police presented their next generation sequence validation. Following a lengthy discussion and questions, the DNA subcommittee requested additional information from the lab. New York State Police representatives presented their additional information at the November 7th DNA subcommittee meeting. And on December 4th, a special meeting of the DNA subcommittee was held to vote on an issue, to issue a binding recommendation to the Commission on Forensic Science to approve the use of next generation sequencing using the MySeq FGX system with the Forensic Intelligence Kit by the New York State Police Crime Laboratory. The binding recommendation, executive summary, and internal validation and lab procedures have been provided for your review. At this point, if there's a discussion on the next generation sequencing or questions for the lab, we do have the lab present today. Erin.
So I have a lot on this. So maybe I'll just tell you my top lines and we can see where they head. First, just as a procedural matter, this was way too much material for me to digest to be ready to take any kind of vote today. So just at the outset, I would propose that we table the vote to the next meeting. I think it was something like 300 pages, and I don't know if I didn't check my email in a timely way, but I got it like a day or two ago, and I had other deadlines I was working on and was not able to devote that attention. Especially for the rest of the packet, and I wanted to make sure I was prepared for the things that we had well in advance. Which again is not a ding on anybody, it's just a statement of time management for me. Secondly, this is a new DNA methodology. It is a dramatic departure from STRs doing actual sequencing work. I have questions whether this strikes me as a legislative decision, not an administrative decision. It has profound implications for privacy, for social trade-offs like public safety and liberty, for data security. The entire governance structure of the executive law under which we operate was written for STRs. And when they say new methodologies, I think they're thinking of like, we're going from RFLPs to like they're not thinking of a massive sort of step change in going from non-coding junk DNA at 13 loci, maybe 26 or whatever, to going to coding, genetically rich material that's used in health, that's used for researchers trying to do behavioral insights, ancestry, and so forth. And understanding that those are not the uses requested today, allowing in-house government labs to do that work is a tremendous change that I think an administrative commission is not positioned to make, and involves the kind of trade-off that we are not well equipped to, social balancing that we are not well equipped to do. I also frankly have questions about the legality in the absence of specific legislation authorizing this kind of testing. This is me speaking less as my sort of ethics and privacy expertise, which as the only member of this commission with that supposed expertise, like I do not feel personally equipped to address the ethical and privacy implications on this incredible technology. But on the legal part, which I also have expertise in, the Second Circuit's approval of the statutes that collect DNA and so forth, the Supreme Court's approval, those cases are full of language about junk DNA, non-coding loci. These are not, actual sequences, they're just repeats, et cetera. And so I have questions about even the legality. And we would be really writing on a clean slate here without any legislative guidance, because when I went back and looked at all the statutes, they are all set up for STRs, and the only insight you even get into what happens if you start typing, coding loci in large volumes, like with SNPs, you know, everything about them seems to indicate don't do it. Don't do anything that's about this kind of insightful. So I feel like we would be basically authorizing the use of a technology that the very little information we have from our legislature about whether it should be allowed is pointing in the direction of it not being allowed. And then the last thing for now I'll say, and I have other thoughts on the kind of details. So if we do proceed, I have more thoughts needless to say, but is, you know, if we were to think about authorizing this, you know, capacity in-house in a government lab, we absolutely, I think, need to have public hearings with multiple stakeholders where we bring in the kind of expertise and knowledge that really is required to make this decision. Because I don't think this room right now, you know, has that expertise in a sufficient level. And it's not just, again, the scientific question of can we do this scientifically well? It's a social policy, public policy, criminal legal system policy question about should we be doing this kind of genetic testing? The same way as if someone came in and said, oh, we have the capacity now to determine predisposition for sexual offending or sexual deviance. You know, the DNA subcommittee would be like, this is scientifically sound and they can do it. But the answer to should we be doing that and authorizing that as a state is the science there. The answer to that is a series of questions about trade-offs of public safety and so forth. Last 2 points quickly. I also think this is obviously intricately entwined with FIG, with, you know, the use of forensic investigative genetic genealogy. I think we need a policy on that in our state, which we do not have, or legislative authorization. So I think it goes hand in hand. And I will add that, you know, Ancestry just announced they are closing all of their databases for law enforcement. I just want to share this in case this room is unaware, for law enforcement access, which my understanding is 99% of cases get solved using those databases. They own newspapers.com, they have all the trees. So, you know, everything in my community is telling me that without Ancestry's permission, this method is dead. Because it will take a long time and there may not be a you know, resource capacity to build up that information in a law enforcement form. MyHeritage, which has long forbidden the use of this, but has sort of tacitly, you know, wink, wink, let it happen, also has shut down law enforcement access because they no longer allow uploads, is my understanding. So the only databases in which this can be done as a genetic searching matter is going to be the GEDPRO database and the family tree DNA database. And just those databases alone, from my understanding, are really not enough because you then need Ancestry's massive composites of, you know, birth certificates, marriage certificates, huge family trees, etc. So I also question whether, you know, this is useful. And then last, the last piece is that it seems to me that ANAB should be first accredited, that there's a role here for accreditation in the formal, that we are not positioned to do the kind of review, and the DNA subcommittee is not positioned to do the kind of review to approve this, that there should have been or should be a ANAB approval to work from. And I think that's even statutorily required as I read the statute, because, or not the statute, I guess I should say, the implementing regs, because our regs say if you're going to do DNA testing, it has to be, you have to be accredited for it. So that's like a very small bore piece, but I also think that's it. So all of those things together, you know, they're all huge. I can say more on each, but I think they're all major concerns.
Thank you. I see Stephen's hand up, and then I see a couple other hands. Yeah, Stephen, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, great, thanks. I want to concur with Erin. This size of materials, and I'm not saying it was anybody's fault, it made it impossible for me to go through this, especially with my familiarity, let's say, use that word, with DNA. So I would join the application to table this discussion until we could adequately go through the materials.
So I think, to me, it is a lot of materials, but the technical review was done by, which most of that was done by the DNA subcommittee. and they issued a binding recommendation from what I see. So really, we should be concerned, in my opinion, we should be concerned about the description, right? The policy aspects is another thing, but one thing I want to bring up is that law enforcement agencies right now can outsource to Bodie, to Parabon, and New York, we have voted on that before, right? They're accredited for New York State, am I correct?
They are accredited.
Right.
And they are approved to perform this.
Right, and so in my opinion, why would we not want one of our labs that's fully accredited to not do this and have it in state rather than outsource it? I mean, that's just one very surface level point to bring up. Regarding the privacy aspects, I can't answer that either. I know some of these databases are voluntary, right? So I don't know which side of privacy you're speaking to in that case. And regarding the accreditation, I do recognize that we would have to first have ANAB accreditation, but I would be comfortable, if it's permitted, I don't even know if it is, to participate in a vote contingent upon the review. So.
I'm in a meeting.
Can I just raise a question on the binding aspect? Because, you know, apart from the fact that I think binding or not, this is a legislative judgment on the administrative judgment. My understanding is that our statute says that DNA methodologies can be recommended by the commission, or to the commission by the subcommittee. But that is not part of the very narrow set of binding things that they can give us. They can give us binding recommendations, or that's a, you know, as the Supreme Court said, that's just, the Court of Appeals said that's a tautology. They can give us binding mandates as to a forensic laboratory's accreditation and as to minimum scientific standards. But as to the DNA subcommittee's assessment and evaluation of DNA methodologies proposed to be used for forensic analysis, it can make reports and recommendations as it deems necessary, but they are recommendations. And our Court of Appeals has specifically said, both the DNA subcommittee has very narrow technical expertise, and in upholding the familial search policy that was endorsed by this commission, which is a sort of related set of issues, they specifically said it was a non-binding resolution on this commission, and that's why this commission's vote was upheld by the court, specifically because it was a commission vote, not because it was a DNA subcommittee binding. And there was a messy record there, which they, you know, clarified a particular direction. So I think if we think it's binding, we need to make crystal clear our belief it's binding. I do not believe it is binding. I think it's outside. This is a new DNA methodology. And I think the Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, the Court of Appeals and the statute make clear that means it's a commission decision. Again, I don't even think it belongs as a commission decision. I think it's a legislative judgment. I think it has all the hallmarks of a legislative judgment. But if this commission or the legal folks in the room are going to disagree, then at the minimum, it's a commission determination, and it's a commission determination that I don't think we should be making without more input from experts in a wide variety of areas, whether it's, you know, criminal legal system or civil rights, or understanding how from the scientific perspective this is different from STRs and so forth.
So are you at the beginning of your comments mentioned tabling? Are you making a motion to table this?
Yes, I'm happy to make a motion to table it. Motion to table.
Pending some legal investigation?
That would be worthwhile, I think, also to clarify. I mean, I think there's a number of things that could happen in the interim, but that's certainly one of them.
Do we need to clarify more specifically those things, or?
I think Ms. Murphy made the record of what she's looking for.
All right, so I have a motion.
Is it fair to also include pending ANA reassessment? Or is that not required?
I took it as if she was tabling the discussion.
Does one come before the other? I just meant like, should that be added, like additional investigation? And I mean, if you come back in March with more, but they haven't been assessed yet, then we might end up tabling it again. So I'm just asking, should it be included now or not? That's all.
just for the commission's knowledge, the assessment cycle is January. Just ANAB will be coming on site in January to look at the state polices.
Oh, so then we'll hear by March anyway. Okay.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to table this pending some further information that we'll receive at the March meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining?
I'm understanding.
All right. Next, we have our laboratory disclosures. There's a handful of these. First is Monroe County Crime Laboratory. The laboratory has provided a closeout to DCJS and ANAB regarding sample swap during an extraction in the biology section. This was first discussed at the September meeting. Previous casework was reviewed and reanalysis was performed on a subset of cases. No additional cases were found to be affected. The analyst has been returned to casework. The lab has also submitted an initial notification to DCJS and ANAB regarding the use of an unapproved equipment in the preparation of calibration standards in the drug chemistry section. The analyst did not use the procedure to verify the approved equipment. No affected results were reported. Are there any questions for the laboratory regarding either of these disclosures?
The second one?
Yep, sure. We have members available remotely. Okay, Lydia, I think we have the lab present.
Okay, hi Monroe, thanks for your patience. It's Lydia DeCastro. Just one question, about the electronic pipettes. I just wanted to know if they're used to prepare quantitation calibration standards for any other drugs.
No, they are not.
And what do you use for that purpose?
Used to prepare the quantitation standards, or what are the electronic pipettes used for?
No, so if you don't use the electronic pipettes for the to prepare the standards, what do you use?
Class A volumetric glassware.
Okay, so you do it manually?
Yes, at this time.
Okay. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Can I actually ask? Good afternoon, I guess.
Good afternoon.
I had a question about the reporting of the DNA sample switch that was caught. If you could just clarify, it sounded like the analyst was rightfully concerned, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that a bloodstain sample would be expected to be high template, have a lot of DNA, and that the order in which, I guess, I don't know if it was loaded or tested, might pose a risk of contamination to lower template samples. And that's why the analyst made the game time decision, well, a justifiable concern about the possibility of contamination. Is that right?
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Gail Conklin. I'm the DNA technical leader. Yes, you are correct. When the analyst was setting up her extraction batch, she knew what the sample types were and she was expecting to process the bloodstain last. She did inventory the items first, and based on the appearance of the possible bloodstain, it was not what you would expect, like a saturated swab that was, looked bloody. It was more like something that looked like had been swabbed on a fingerprint powder and no visible red-brown stain. So she said, okay, I don't think this is going to be a concern that it has too much DNA to process in numerical order. And then, as you said, she made those decisions and didn't change the other components in the process, and had a ripple effect. within the extraction. Does that make sense?
It does. I think the concern was well placed. Do your protocols cover, do you separate high and low template processing in time and space? What do your protocols cover or require?
Our protocols are to go low to high, not necessarily on a different instrument, but separated by blanks. So we'll start with the lower template things, have a blank, and then it might proceed kind of in that fashion. We move left to right. So there might be a moderate, I mean, it's all evidence. So unfortunately, you don't really know how much DNA is there, but we attempt to do the lowest possible first and then proceed to higher.
Right. And have you changed any of your evidence processing to sort of account for that expected, again, you never know for sure with casework, but the sort of expected like sex assault kits and exemplars? Do you make effort to separate those from, say, touch or handled DNA evidence items at the examination stage?
Again, in the order that we process them, yes, but they may still go on the extractor robot at the same time.
Right, separated by blanks, you said.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Monroe County? Next, Nassau County Office of Medical Examiner, Division of Forensic Toxicology. The laboratories provided DCJS and ANAB with an initial notification and closeout of the incorrect identification of a compound in screening data for proficiency test sample. This was not identified during technical review, but was found during the preliminary case review prior to the release of results. A review of the past work of both the analyst and the tech reviewer was completed. Are there any questions for the laboratory?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. We have representatives available virtually.
Trying to get my thing here. Here we go. Hello?
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. This is Michelle Schmitz. I just had a quick question. I guess I don't know your review process. Would you mind just helping me better understand the order of the reviews? Because it sounds like the tech review may be done before a primary case review, but I don't know what your primary case review is. So could you help us understand what that involves?
Sure, absolutely. You're correct. The batch review or the technical review of the batch is done immediately following the analysis. Once all of the analyses are done for the case, for screening assays, there is a preliminary case review where all those screening tests are reviewed to make sure they meet acceptance criteria. And it was at that point that this issue was notified prior to any, confirmatory or quantitative testing that was done.
But that's before the report is written?
That's correct. It was prior to any authorization of results, final case review, and authorization of the report.
So who caught that, if you don't mind my jumping in?
No, go ahead.
Who caught that error?
That was caught by what we term the preliminary case review, which is done, like I say, when the screening tests are completed prior to us moving on and saying, okay, what now needs to be quantitated or confirmed. At that point, we do a review, decide on what needs to be done. At that point is when the issue was determined.
But I was asking by whom? It wasn't a technical reviewer. Was it another analyst?
It was done by a section leader. I'm sorry.
Section leader. Okay.
Correct.
I just had one other question. I noticed that it mentions it was performed based on peak retention time. Is this just a GC method, or is this what is the detector?
This is just a GC headspace, so it's based upon retention time and elution order. It's based on two different injections on the instrument on two different columns that have a different elution order. So it's based on retention time is how we identify it. There's not a mass spectrum that's associated with this analysis.
Okay, thanks. I just wasn't sure because they're two different compounds. So I was trying to understand if it was based retention time only, if there were mass specs. Thank you. You've answered my question.
I wanted to ask about why only ethanol was notated by the instrument.
The method was initially set up that way to make it easier to determine ethanol. The main goal of that screening method is for the screening and quantitation of ethanol. But within that same method, we are just doing a strict screening for what we term other common bottles, methanol, acetone, isopropanol. So to make the reporting a little bit easier at the time when this method was created, we had not put on the labeling of the other common volatiles. Like I said, now after this issue, we have added that labeling, but it really was just in a manner to make the reporting a little bit easier or evaluation of the data printouts.
Well, was this particular instrument primarily meant to be used for cases where there was the likelihood of finding anything other than ethanol would be low? Because obviously there could still be, some other peak that's seen that isn't labeled initially. And so what would be the protocol if there's another peak that's now unlabeled?
So the analysis itself, in every batch analysis, we do analyze a known reference mix that contains ethanol and the other targeted compounds of methanol, acetone, isopropanol. So we always know what the retention time is of any other peak in that analysis, and that instrument is only used for volatile testing for those compounds.
So from a retention time standpoint, it wouldn't be, I think it was acetone, it wouldn't have been coming out at the retention time for ethanol. So then that peak needed to be hand notated that it was acetone?
Correct. So on the data, in the QC samples and in the known reference mix that contained acetone, the retention time was noted, but in that case sample, the analyst had inadvertently called that peak as ethanol when an acetone, but because, like I said, we were not having the instrument automatically label the case samples with those other common volatile names.
But the instrument itself wouldn't have labeled it ethanol if it wasn't at the ethanol retention time, would it?
Well, the way the instrument works is it doesn't matter what's there. It's always going to label it ethanol, but the concentration would have been 0.0. So it's always going to put the name on there of ethanol, but is there a number next to it that indicates that it found a peak there? At this case, like I said, the ethanol was 0.0 in this case sample, but they inadvertently, like I said, did not see that there was a number for this other peak for acetone.
I see. How close are the retention times for acetone versus ethanol?
You're talking, there's two different columns in there, so maybe about a half a minute apart for each on there.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No further questions? Next up, we have the New York City Police Department Laboratory. DCJS and ANAB have been notified of an amended report that was not issued in a timely manner. There was also an issue with the documentation of non-testing personnel involved. Additional notes were added to the case record and the assistant district attorney has been notified. The investigation is ongoing. And if there are any questions for the laboratory, we have them connected virtually. Seeing none. We'll move on to the New York State Division of Criminal Justice's latent print laboratory. DCJS and ANAB were notified of a report issued that had a missing case information from the header that was not caught during the review. At the time that the report was created, there was an upgrade to Windows 11. Case reports created during that time frame of the upgrade were reviewed and one additional draft report was found to be effective. Are there any questions for the laboratories? Seeing none. New York State Police Crime Laboratory. DCJS and ANAB were notified of an unsatisfactory performance monitoring activity. During the observation audit, an analyst relied on memory for acceptance criteria while technically reviewing the data. A selection of past data that was technically reviewed by the analyst was re-reviewed with no errors found. A follow-up observation audit was performed with satisfactory results. Additionally, DCJS and ANAB were notified of an analyst with an incomplete case assignment in which the DNA report had not been issued in a reasonable time frame. All supervisors were instructed to identify any additional assignments with unusual timeframes, and no other instances were identified, and the investigation is ongoing. Are there any questions for the laboratory today? None. Suffolk County Crime Laboratory. The laboratories provided an initial notification to DCJS and ANAB regarding a seized drug deficiency test. The analyst combined two items intended to be analyzed separately prior to quantitation. Therefore, no results can be submitted to the provider. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Yes, Aaron. If we could get Suffolk County. Back, thank you for joining us again.
Hi again, maybe I'll sit forward. Sorry, this is Erin. I just wanted to understand why the analyst combines them. Is that something that's like a practice in casework? Did they just get confused? Like why did they combine the two separates?
So at this point, we're in the beginning stages of the root cause process, and we're trying to sit with her and understand what occurred, right, exactly, and why she decided to combine the two samples. But it seemed to us that the instructions were pretty clear that they were two separate items. We do have a policy in the lab that if the samples belong to the same suspect and they're at a certain weight, we could combine them. So we are under the impression that maybe she got confused at that point, but we are still investigating.
Wonderful. We'll hear back what you find. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
One other question.
Hi, this is Michelle. I just have one other question. How did you come to find out? Did the analyst realize it afterwards, or was this a caught on tech review? Just trying to understand the process. Sorry?
It was caught on the tech review.
Okay.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Suffolk County Medical Examiner's Toxicology Laboratory. The laboratory has notified DCJS and ANAB of a closeout of an unexpected result on a proficiency test. The analyst is in their training period and does not perform casework. They will continue running practice tests until the 2026 yearly proficiency test is received. Are there any questions for the laboratory?
Yes.
Yes, okay. If we can get Suffolk Tox on the line, please. Welcome.
Hello, how is everyone?
Good, how are you?
Good.
This is Lydia DeCastro. Regarding the trainee, is it the practice of for your training program to include external PTs as part of a trainee's training?
They do get competency tested, and they may include some prior samples from PTs.
But this wasn't a current PT?
This was a current PT for her to be approved to do that analysis as she came off her traineeship.
I see. Okay, I thought it was, because it said as she is still in her 2-year training period, so I wasn't sure where in her training it fell. So this was at the end of the training prior to.
The test is only offered at a certain time, so we took advantage of that time period to get her her yearly PT completed.
Okay. Now there is mention of the trainee also having a license already.
She was already approved from the prior year.
And having taken an external PT wasn't part of the requirement for the licensing? Yes.
Well, the license is what was given after she took the PT.
After, okay. I don't know, is this preliminary? No, this is closeout. I was just curious to know whether you spoke with the trainee to ask if they had any particular issue with performing this work?
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, there was discussion with her throughout the process of remediation, and her input was that she not exactly comfortable with the technique she was using at the time, which is what we focused on. We changed her technique.
And she had not expressed any previous discomfort with the technique?
No. No, since she had passed previous tests the year prior, so it didn't appear to be an issue with her at the time.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions today for the laboratory? Thank you for joining us. Oh,
did I miss the state police?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have questions?
You can go back. Hang on. I just have one question.
Sure. Have members present.
So with the technical, okay, so I'll just read this. In one instance, a DNA request was assigned. The report had been drafted in March 2022 and the tech review completed. The secondary review is in progress and had been returned to the scientist for revision. So what is the secondary review? Is it an admin review?
No, it's another technical.
It's okay, so is that necessary in particular circumstances? Or what triggers a secondary review?
No, we secondary review
everything. Oh, so it's 2 technical reviews? So it said the technical review was completed in May 2022. The secondary review was in progress. So it's another technical review?
It's another set of technical review that we apply in cases when we have evidence profiles that are mixtures.
Okay.
It's just an added quality level that we want another qualified analyst to review the report before it goes to administrative review.
So that's a routine part of your SOP?
Right.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Can I jump in? Sure. I just want, if I'm understanding correctly, we're on like page 75, right? Yeah. So just because you're here and I say this just to articulate it out loud, especially for those listening, I'm sure you as a manager know this, but we all fall behind in our work at times and all of that. That's a normal process. But I also think it can be a red flag for, many of the scandals we've seen in other DNA labs in other states have occurred when people are feeling pressured, and we know how resource constrained everyone is, and they start cutting corners. And so something like this, can be as simple as someone falling behind, but it also can be, I think, a kind of good time to make sure like other behaviors that are corner cutting behaviors don't occur. I'm just thinking of like the example of people who weren't running negative controls. They were substituting negative controls because they just didn't feel they had the time, or so just articulating that out loud since you're here and for other lab folks as well. That's it.
We're well aware of the pressures and constraints on our folks at the lab, considering all of the things that you all have talked about today. We're well aware. With OSAC reviews, standards upkeep, accreditation, spending thousands of hours on validations only to be tabled to legislative needs that should have been talked about, in my opinion, months prior to. We understand the needs of our folks, and we are keeping a tab on that, trust me.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
We'll jump back to Westchester County, I believe. Westchester County Department of Labs and Research, Division of Forensic Science. 3 different items here. The laboratory has provided an initial notification to DCGIS and ANAB of items of evidence that may be affected by water damage. A bin containing evidence cuttings that had accumulated water in the walk-in refrigerator. An update to the event indicated notifications were made to the district attorney's office and Legal Aid Society, and retesting of some of the samples. The initial cause of the leak has been investigated, and the lab continues to take actions to address this disclosure. Next, ANAB and DCGS were notified of unacceptable negative controls during a GSR primer analysis investigation. During the investigation, it was determined that the analyst had deviated from the cleaning procedure, and casework was paused, and 5 years worth of casework of the analyst was evaluated. No cases were found to be affected. DCGS was also provided a follow-up regarding the unexpected result of a trace proficiency test, first discussed at the June meeting. The response provided more detailed information to several questions asked of the lab at that meeting. So are there any questions regarding any of these 3 disclosures today?
Just want to say thank you for the footwear response. It was helpful.
Well, you're welcome. All right, seeing no further questions, the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology. The laboratory has provided an interim update to their case-to-case contamination investigation. The laboratory is working to procure the services of an expert statistical consultant who can help to design and implement a method for continuous evaluation of contamination risk. Since the last update, 1 additional contamination event has been identified, and the lab continues to review the event. Are there any questions for the lab? Yes, seeing one, if we could get Sammy back.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. As Shelley just said, since your last update, there was 1 additional discovery of a contamination incident. So I think your letter stated it's an increase from 48 contaminated samples from 42 different cases involving 11 criminalists. We're now at 49 samples from 42 cases and 12 criminalists. Is that correct?
49 cases, 49 samples, 43 cases, 12 criminals.
Thank you for that correction. What was the date of the testing, and can you say a little bit more about the most recently discovered instance of contamination?
The date was within 2021, date of examination.
Okay. And this was, was this a case-to-case contamination?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Could you say a little bit more about the circumstances?
Let me come closer. What I could add in is that it was me though, the similar mode of contamination from high template sample to a low template sample.
Did it occur at the examination state? How did you detect this?
It was detected during the same investigation modes that we've had ongoing, where we're ensuring the integrity of profiles within our LDIS, and it was from one evidence sample to another. Yes.
So sorry, what does that mean? I know you're referring to an existing process, but does that mean you're going into your local DNA index system and doing what exactly to detect contamination?
We're verifying that the profiles within there are not of elimination samples from sexual assault kits.
So, sorry, can you just take step through step what happened with this one specific instance, like in order of exactly how you discovered it? It's just, I'm sorry, I'm asking piecemeal questions, and I just want to piece together how you uncovered it.
I got you, Commissioner. The mechanism that we saw the most in terms of these contaminations was a sample with a large amount of DNA that was contaminating a subsequent sample with a small amount of DNA. The majority of the ones that we saw were elimination samples, specifically from sexual assault kits, because you have victim cavity samples with a lot of DNA that are being cut over and over again. And if the improper cleaning of the scissors is done, then you're accumulating DNA from that victim on the scissors, and then subsequently cutting a sample with low amounts of DNA, and that was the increased chance of contamination there. So in order to look at that as a possibility, we've been taking the samples, elimination samples from our sexual assault kits, and comparing them to our local database to ensure the integrity of the samples that are in the database aren't due to contamination.
Thank you, that makes sense. How far back are you going again in that particular part of the project?
We haven't decided that as to how far back we need to go. That's why we want the statistical analysis done to ensure that we are looking at it from a significant standpoint in terms of the number of samples to look back. So currently we went back looking at all of the evidence that was examined and kits examined by the individuals that we have identified as having contamination events. Since we had one of the individuals from 2021, that's why we decided to take a look at cases from 2021. But obviously we can't go back to every single case for every single year. So that's why we want to take a more direct approach to it using that statistical analysis.
And that review, sorry, you were referring to reviewing that particular analyst, that's the latest that you discovered that person's casework? Or did I misunderstand?
It's the current authorized examiners. The individual that we latest discovery was a case that was examined in 2021. So we are looking at kits that were examined in 2021 and doing that targeted approach as I spoke of. From all examiners, not just from that one examiner.
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry to interrupt. How is the work with the statistical consultant coming along?
We actually just received the purchase order for the procurement, so we are in the initial stages of finally got the procurement purchase order, so we're in the initial stages of discussing with them. We're actually have a meeting set up for Monday to talk about it.
Great, thank you. Further questions today? Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of the meeting today. First, I just want to thank you all for your participation today. and all year. I think the commissioner opened with thanking you for your time. It's, definitely an undertaking, especially when we have such important things to talk about. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
And wishing you all happy holidays and good luck tonight, Stephen, in your performance. Wishing
Thank you. I would say happy holidays, but hey, I'm getting into character, so humbug.
So the next meeting will be on March 13th. We will let you know the location as soon as it's available. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Michelle, a second? Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Thanks, bye.
Good luck to Pat.
Thank you, everybody. Good luck.
Thanks, Pat. Good luck.